Hey everyone, welcome to Yellowfan. I hope you are all doing well. Today I want to argue that The Simpsons, a show that millions of people grew up watching as a family comedy, has produced some of the most genuinely disturbing content ever put inside a cartoon, and that the most unsettling episodes are not disturbing because of monsters or jump scares, but because of something far harder to shake. They are disturbing because they are honest. Honest about how easily a community can destroy a child. Honest about how a good man can be broken simply by standing next to the wrong person. Honest about how the people and places and objects that are supposed to keep you safe are sometimes the most dangerous things in the room. Across 12 episodes spanning the show's entire run, we are going to look at exactly what The Simpsons was willing to put on screen when it decided to stop being comfortable, and why those moments have stayed with audiences for decades in a way that most horror content never does. But before we begin, I would just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It is completely free and it helps this channel more than you know. Anyway, that is enough of that. Let us get into it. Treehouse of Horror 5, the episode that proved The Simpsons could be genuinely scary. The Simpsons has always known how to make people laugh. That is what the show was built for. From Homer falling downstairs to Bart getting in trouble at school, the whole point was to be funny. But every Halloween season, the show did something different. It stepped outside its own rules. It stopped worrying about being a family comedy and started trying to disturb you. And in the 6th season, with the 5th Treehouse of Horror, the show made something that many people still consider the most unsettling thing it ever produced. Treehouse of Horror 5 aired in 1994. It contains 3 separate horror stories packed into one episode. Each one gets progressively darker than the last. By the time the episode ends, you have watched children get cooked and eaten, a man get killed with an axe 3 separate times, and a family melt together into a single pile of flesh while a trombone plays in the background. There is no happy ending. There is no moment where everything returns to normal. The show simply ends, and you are left with whatever you just saw. To understand why this episode hits so hard, you have to look at each segment individually and understand what the writers were actually going for, because this was not an accident. Every dark choice in this episode was deliberate. The first segment is called The Shining. It is a parody of The Shining, the 1980 horror film directed by Stanley Kubrick and based on Stephen King's novel. In the original film, a man named Jack Torrance takes his family to a remote hotel for the winter, slowly loses his mind due to supernatural forces, and tries to murder his wife and son with an axe. The Simpsons version replaces Jack Torrance with Homer Simpson and places the family in Mr. Burns' remote mountain estate instead of a hotel. The setup is simple. Mr. Burns wants the family to look after his estate over the winter. He orders groundskeeper Willie to cut off the cable television signal and remove all the beer from the property before they arrive. Homer walks in, settles into his chair, reaches for the television remote, and finds nothing. He reaches for a beer and finds nothing. Marge watches him carefully. Within seconds, Homer begins to crack. What makes this segment work as actual horror rather than just comedy is how quickly Homer becomes dangerous. The moment he loses access to the 2 things that keep him calm and happy, the mask comes off. He starts scrawling on the walls. He chases Marge through the hallways. He corners Bart and looks at him with eyes that carry no warmth. The famous line from this segment is written on the walls over and over again, just like in the original film, but the joke lands differently than it seems like it should. It is funny for about 2 seconds. Then you are watching a father trying to axe his children to death through a hedge maze in a blizzard, and the humor evaporates. Groundskeeper Willie is killed in this segment. He appears just as Homer is about to do real damage, stepping in to help the family. Homer buries an axe in his back without hesitation. Willie falls. He is gone. The family runs. Now here is the thing that most people notice on a second viewing. Willie does not just die once in this episode. He dies in every single segment. 3 times across one episode, Groundskeeper Willie shows up to help someone in danger. 3 times, he is killed by an axe to the back. The deaths are not played as parody. They are not softened with cartoon logic. Willie shows up, tries to help, and gets killed. Every single time. By the 3rd death, it stops being a running joke and starts feeling like something else entirely. It feels like the show is making a quiet, bleak point, about the people who try to do the right thing and get destroyed for it. The second segment, Time and Punishment, is a parody of the Ray Bradbury story A Sound of Thunder. Homer accidentally breaks the toaster and ends up creating a time machine while trying to fix it. He travels back to prehistoric times and is told by his past self not to touch or kill anything, because even the smallest change could alter the future completely. Homer immediately kills a mosquito, then another one, then several more. He tries to fix each mistake and makes everything worse with every attempt. Each time he returns to the present, the world is different and more horrifying than before. In one timeline, Flanders is an all-powerful dictator who has conquered the entire human population. In another, the family has no tongues. In another, it is raining donuts, which seems like a good outcome to Homer, until he realizes something else is wrong. He cannot find a version of the present that is right. Every fix breaks something new. There is no timeline where everything is okay. This segment is more psychologically disturbing than the shinning in some ways, because it takes away any possibility of a correct answer. Homer is not fighting a monster. He is fighting consequence, and he cannot win. The horror here is the futility of it, the idea that damage, once done, cannot truly be undone. It just gets replaced by different damage. Willie is killed in this segment too. Same axe, same back, same result. The third segment is Nightmare Cafeteria, and this is the one that goes the furthest. This is the segment that people remember when they say the episode disturbed them as children. It takes a very simple premise, school lunch, and turns it into something that plays as a genuine horror film for about half its runtime before the show's sense of humor reasserts itself. Even then, the humor is so dark that it barely functions as relief. The story begins with Springfield Elementary facing two problems at the same time. The cafeteria is running out of money to buy food. The detention room is massively overcrowded. Principal Skinner watches both problems develop separately and then realizes he has one solution for both. He begins putting the children who are in detention into the cafeteria food supply. This is presented with complete seriousness. Skinner and the school faculty are hunting students. They are choosing which ones to cook. The children begin disappearing one by one. Bart and Lisa figure out what is happening before they become the next meal, but they cannot stop it because the adults are all in on it. Every teacher, every authority figure, every person who is supposed to protect them has become the threat. There is nowhere to run because the danger is not an outside force. It is the institution itself. The people running the school are feeding the students to other students. Uter is the character who disappears most memorably. He is a German exchange student who has appeared occasionally in earlier episodes. In Nightmare Cafeteria, he vanishes. Later, when Bart and Lisa ask where he is, Principal Skinner responds with one of the most casually horrifying lines in the show's entire run. He tells the children to relax, that he has a feeling Uter is around somewhere, and that there is a little Uter in all of them. He then tells them that they just ate Uter, and that Uter is inside their stomachs right now. He delivers this information in the same tone he would use to announce a change to the school schedule. No drama, no guilt, just a calm, cheerful statement that the children eating lunch have already consumed their classmate. That single line contains the essence of what makes Nightmare Cafeteria so effective as horror. It is the casualness of it. It is the fact that Skinner is not a monster who looks like a monster. He is a middle-aged school principal in a sweater. He speaks in measured, professional sentences, and he is telling children that they ate their friend and that his remains are currently inside their bodies. The contrast between the normal surface and the horrifying content is what makes it land so hard. Bart and Lisa try to escape. They are cornered. There is a moment near the end of the segment where it looks like they are genuinely done, that there is no way out and the school is going to win. And then the episode does what Treehouse of Horror segments do. It finds a resolution. Bart and Lisa are saved by a fog that rolls in and melts all the faculty. The threat is over. But the show refuses to end on relief. The fog does not just melt the teachers, it starts melting the whole family too. Bart, Lisa, Homer, Marge, and Maggie begin dissolving and merging together into a single mass of flesh and faces. They are all talking at once, their features blending together, their bodies becoming one indistinguishable pile. A trombone plays. The segment ends. There is no punchline. There is no final joke that resets everything back to normal. The family is gone, replaced by a single fleshy blob of what used to be them. And the episode closes on that image. No explanation, no comfort, just the end. What makes Treehouse of Horror 5 stand apart from every other Halloween special the show produced is that it never actually lets the audience breathe. Most Treehouse of Horror episodes balance their dark moments with enough humor that you always know where you stand. You know when to laugh. You know when the joke is coming. This episode blurs that line deliberately and consistently. Willie dying once is a gag. Willie dying a second time is a callback. Willie dying a third time in the same way, with the same axe, with the same expression on his face, stops being funny. It becomes something harder to name. Nightmare Cafeteria ending with the family melting instead of embracing in relief is the most direct statement the episode makes. After everything, after the axe murders, the failed time loops, the children being eaten, the show refuses to reassure you. It gives you a flesh blob and a trombone, and that is your ending. Sleep well. __quote_2___. And as disturbing as this episode is on the surface, the next section goes somewhere entirely different. Because sometimes the most unsettling thing a show can do is not show you a monster, or a zombie, or a killer, but instead hold up a mirror to its main character and force you to see him the way a real person would. That is exactly what happens in one of the most psychologically brutal episodes the show ever made, and it involves a man named Frank Grimes. Section 2. Homer's Enemy. The episode where the Simpsons admitted Homer Simpson is a monster. Most television shows protect their main characters. No matter what a main character does, no matter how badly they behave, the show finds a way to make them likable again by the end of the episode. The audience is supposed to root for them. The show is built around them. So the writers make sure that even when the main character is selfish or stupid or careless, there is always a reason to forgive them. There is always a reset button. There is always a moment where the character does something warm or funny enough to make you forget what they just did wrong. The Simpsons knew this about itself. The writers understood that Homer Simpson was objectively a terrible person in many measurable ways. He was a neglectful father. He was a dangerous employee at a nuclear power plant. He stumbled through life, causing damage to everyone around him, and faced no real consequences for any of it. The show had been running for 8 seasons and had never once stopped to genuinely reckon with that. And then, in season 8, they made Homer's Enemy, and they reckoned with all of it at once. Homer's Enemy aired in 1997. It is not a horror episode. It is not a Halloween special. It is not trying to scare you with monsters or violence. What it is doing is far more unsettling than any of that, because it is asking you to look at the main character of a show you have watched for years and seriously consider the possibility that his existence is a kind of cruelty inflicted on the world around him. It is asking you to feel genuine sympathy for a man who dies because Homer Simpson exists. and then it is asking you to keep watching the show after that. The episode begins with a news report about Frank Grimes. The report frames him as a hero, a self-made man, someone who started with absolutely nothing and built a real life through pure effort and refusal to quit. We learn that Frank Grimes was abandoned by his parents when he was 4 years old. He spent his childhood alone and fending for himself. As a teenager, he got a job at a factory delivering packages. He worked that job while putting himself through night school. He graduated. He worked harder. He earned a degree in nuclear physics through years of study and sacrifice. He got a small diploma that he is very proud of. He also got a certificate in nuclear physics from a correspondence course, which he frames on the wall. He is not a brilliant man by any stretch, but he has earned everything he has through nothing but his own effort. Mr. Burns sees the news report and is moved by it. He decides to hire Frank Grimes at the Springfield nuclear power plant. Grimes arrives and is placed in Sector 7G in the cubicle next to Homer Simpson. The episode then does something very precise and very deliberate. It shows you Frank Grimes and Homer Simpson side by side and lets you draw your own conclusions. Grimes is organized, careful, and professional. He takes his work seriously because a nuclear power plant is genuinely dangerous, and he understands that. Homer is asleep at his desk. Homer has a photograph of himself with President Gerald Ford on his desk. Homer has a Grammy Award on his desk. Homer is surrounded by evidence of a full and comfortable life that he has done essentially nothing to earn. Grimes tries to introduce himself. Homer is warm and friendly in the way Homer always is, which is to say he is completely oblivious to how his friendliness lands on someone who has worked their entire life for a fraction of what Homer has stumbled into. He invites Grimes to his home for dinner. Grimes goes, expecting a modest house, maybe something small and manageable. He finds a large, comfortable home. He finds a wife who loves Homer. He finds 3 kids. He finds a living room full of trophies and awards and memorabilia from Homer's various adventures. There is a literal rocket ship in the backyard from when Homer went to space. Grimes stares at all of this. He cannot fully process it. Homer went to space. Homer, who falls asleep at a nuclear power plant, who has caused at least 3 major incidents through negligence and incompetence, went to space as a civilian astronaut and returned home safely, and seemingly did not think of it as a particularly big deal. Grimes, who worked every day of his life since he was 4 years old, has a small apartment and a framed diploma on his wall. He has nothing. Homer has everything. Grimes leaves Homer's house that night, and something inside him has shifted. He starts watching Homer differently. He is not angry yet, but he is paying attention in a new way. He begins to see, clearly and without any possibility of looking away, that the rules he has been following his entire life, work hard, be careful, earn what you have, do not apply to Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson operates outside of those rules completely. Homer gets rewarded for failure. Homer gets celebrated for incompetence. Homer lives a full, comfortable, happy life while breaking every rule that Grimes was told was necessary to survive. The breaking point comes when Grimes catches Homer eating his specially labeled lunch from the office refrigerator. He confronts Homer. Homer is confused and apologetic in the way he always is, not genuinely sorry, just uncomfortable with conflict. Grimes snaps at him. He tells Homer, loudly and in front of coworkers, that he cannot stand him, that he finds Homer's existence offensive, that Homer is what is wrong with everything. This gets Grimes in trouble with management. He is demoted. His office is taken away. He is moved to a tiny, cramped workspace that is barely a closet. Homer, meanwhile, is completely unaffected. Grimes decides to humiliate Homer publicly. He enters Homer in a children's nuclear power plant design competition. His plan is simple. Homer will participate, produce something embarrassing and incompetent, and the entire plant will see Homer for what he actually is. For the first time, Grimes will have proof that he can show everyone. He will have his moment where the world acknowledges the injustice of it all. Homer enters the competition. He builds a model nuclear power plant. He is excited about it in the simple, uncomplicated way Homer gets excited about things. He decorates it. He puts effort into it in his own way. He submits it. Homer wins the competition. He beats the children. The adults in the room applaud. Mr. Burns is delighted. Homer holds his trophy and grins and thanks everyone. The children who are actually supposed to win stand around him looking small. Grimes watches this happen. He has no reaction that makes sense to describe in normal terms. He has been broken by this moment in a way that cannot be walked back. He starts laughing. Not a warm laugh, a laugh that has come loose from something inside him. He begins wandering around the plant doing Homer things. He eats someone else's lunch. He ignores safety rules. He talks to coworkers the way Homer talks to coworkers, loosely, carelessly, without concern for procedure. He is demonstrating, to himself as much as anyone else, that Homer's behavior is insane, that a real person cannot live the way Homer lives. He grabs 2 high-voltage wires without safety gloves. He shouts that he does not need safety gloves because he is Homer Simpson. He grabs the wires. The electricity kills him immediately. He dies on the floor of the Springfield nuclear power plant because he tried to prove a point that was completely correct, that Homer Simpson's way of existing in the world should be fatal. And it was fatal, just not to Homer. This is the moment the episode earns its place as one of the most disturbing things the show ever produced. Because Frank Grimes is right. Everything he says about Homer is accurate. Homer should not be alive. Homer should not have a house and a family and a Grammy Award. Homer has caused genuine damage to the world around him his entire adult life and has never once faced a real consequence. Grimes sees this clearly, and it destroys him. His death is not caused by a villain, or a monster, or a supernatural force. It is caused by the pure psychological weight of being the one person in the Simpsons universe who sees Homer the way a real person would. The final scene is the funeral. It is brief. The family is there, the co-workers are there. Someone says something respectful about Grimes. The ceremony proceeds the way funeral ceremonies proceed. Homer falls asleep. He is tired from what has apparently been a long week. He begins dreaming about something. Whatever it is, it makes him laugh. He laughs out loud at his own dream in the middle of Frank Grimes's funeral. The congregation goes quiet. Everyone turns to look at Homer. Homer laughs again, still asleep, still completely elsewhere. Lenny looks at Homer and then looks at the rest of the room. He smiles. He says simply, "That is our Homer." The episode ends there. There is no consequence for Homer. There is no moment where he understands what Grimes went through. There is no indication that he has registered the death at all in any meaningful way. A man who worked every day of his life since childhood, who had nothing handed to him, who tried to hold Homer accountable and was broken by the impossibility of it, is in a coffin, and Homer is laughing in his sleep at the funeral, and the people around him find it endearing. The reason this episode is so disturbing is that it does not let you look away from any of that. It does not soften it. It does not give Grimes a flaw that justifies his fate. It does not give Homer a redemptive moment that balances the scales. It just shows you what happened and ends. Grimes is dead. Homer is fine. The world continues. What the show is admitting in this episode is that its own universe is fundamentally unfair in a way that would genuinely break a real person. Most of the time, the show hides this by keeping all the characters inside the cartoon logic together. Nobody in Springfield ever really stops and looks at Homer the way Grimes does, because everyone in Springfield operates on the same loose, forgiving logic that Homer does. Grimes is different because he is written as a real person dropped into a cartoon world. He follows the rules of reality. He works hard. He earns things. He expects the world to make sense. And the world of the show kills him for it. That is what makes Homer's enemy feel less like a television episode and more like something the writers needed to say. After 8 years of Homer Simpson, they stopped protecting him for 22 minutes and showed you the other side of the joke. The side where a real person is watching, and it is not funny at all. __quote _3___. As dark as Homer's enemy gets through pure psychological realism, the next section takes a completely different approach to disturbing its audience. Because while Homer's enemy uses a real person to expose how dark the show's world actually is, the next episode uses a child, a missing piece of paper, and a dream sequence to ask one of the heaviest questions a cartoon has ever asked. What happens to a kid who sells something he cannot get back? Section 3. Bart Sells His Soul. The episode where a cartoon asked if children have a soul to lose. There is a certain kind of story that works best when it is told simply. No monsters, no chase scenes, no one getting hurt in a way you can see, just a quiet, creeping feeling that something is wrong, and the slow realization that the thing that is wrong might not be fixable. Bart Sells His Soul is that kind of story. It is an episode of a cartoon comedy show that somehow manages to ask one of the heaviest questions you can ask about a human being, and it asks it through a 10-year-old boy who sold a piece of paper for $5 and then spent the rest of the episode trying to get it back. Bart Sells His Soul aired in 1995 during the 7th season of The Simpsons. On the surface, it is a simple episode. Bart makes a bet, the bet goes wrong, he tries to fix it, he gets help in the end. That is the whole plot. But the way the show handles that plot, the commitment it makes to treating the soul as something real and measurable and genuinely important, is what turns this episode into something that stays with you long after it is over. It is not trying to scare you. It is not trying to unsettle you through violence or dark imagery. It is unsettling you through sincerity. It means every word it says, and that is the part that hits hardest. The episode begins in church. Bart has switched the congregation's hymn sheets with the lyrics to a song called In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, which is a rock song that runs for about 17 minutes. The church choir begins singing it without realizing what they have been given. The organ player follows along. The whole congregation ends up trapped in a 17-minute rock song in the middle of Sunday service, while Reverend Lovejoy stands at the front looking increasingly confused and helpless. It is a classic Bart scheme, simple, effective, and funny. When the service is over and Bart is being questioned about who put the sheets there, he denies everything. Milhouse panics and almost gives Bart up. Bart covers for both of them and they walk away clean. Outside the church, Milhouse is grateful. He thanks Bart for not getting them both in trouble. And Bart, feeling clever and untouchable, decides to explain why souls do not exist. He tells Milhouse, with the complete confidence of a 10-year-old who has just gotten away with something, that the soul is just something made up to scare people. It is not real. It has no weight. It does not do anything. It is just a word. Milhouse is not fully convinced, but he is also 10 years old and not in a position to win a theological argument on a Sunday morning. Bart, wanting to prove his point completely, writes the words Bart Simpson's soul on a piece of paper. He tells Milhouse that if the soul were real, this piece of paper would mean something. He offers to sell it to Milhouse for $5. Milhouse, who has $5, buys it. Bart pockets the money and walks away satisfied. This is where the episode stops being a comedy about a church prank and becomes something else. The change does not happen all at once. It comes in small moments that Bart notices but cannot explain. The first thing that happens is that he passes through an automatic door at the Quickie Mart and the door does not open for him. He has to push it himself. He stands there for a moment looking at the door, confused, and then walks through. He does not think too much about it. Automatic doors malfunction. It probably means nothing. Then he passes a dog on the street. Dogs have always responded to Bart. He reaches out to pet it and the dog backs away from him. Not aggressively, not with growling or barking. It simply does not want to be near him. It looks at him the way you would look at something you do not recognize. Bart watches it go and does not say anything. These two moments are written and filmed with the same quiet precision. The show is not announcing that something is wrong. It is not using dramatic music or close-ups to tell you how to feel. It is just showing you small things not working the way they should. A door, a dog, minor inconveniences, except they are not random. They are the first signs of an absence. The next sign is worse. Bart tries to laugh at something. A genuinely funny thing happens in front of him, and he opens his mouth to laugh, and what comes out is not a real laugh. It is the shape of a laugh. It has the right sound, the right timing, but there is nothing behind it. It is hollow. Bart can hear the difference himself. He tries again and gets the same result. He stands alone and makes the sound of laughing without feeling it, and the camera just watches him do it, and the scene moves on. By this point, Bart is starting to understand that something is actually wrong. He does not have the vocabulary for what it is. He does not fully believe in souls, or at least he does not want to. But the evidence is adding up in a way he cannot dismiss. Things that used to work are not working. Something that was part of him is not there anymore. He needs the piece of paper back. He goes to Milhouse. He offers to buy it back. Milhouse, who paid $5 for it, wants more than $5 to return it. They cannot agree on a price, and while they are negotiating, Milhouse reveals that he has already sold the soul to someone else. A stranger at the mall. He does not know who the stranger was. He does not know where they went. The soul is gone, and Bart does not know where to start looking. He searches. He tries to track down whoever Milhouse sold the paper to. He goes to the mall and finds nothing useful. He asks around and gets nowhere. The piece of paper with his name on it is somewhere in Springfield, and he cannot find it. And every day that passes, he feels its absence more. Then comes the dream. The nightmare sequence in Bart Sells His Soul is the moment the episode fully commits to everything it has been building toward. Bart dreams that he is in a boat on a gray, still body of water. The sky above him has no color. The water has no color. Everything is flat and quiet and empty. Other boats appear around him, each one carrying one of his classmates from Springfield Elementary. Every one of his classmates has a companion in their boat, a glowing, translucent version of themselves, a soul that is right there with them, rowing alongside them in perfect rhythm. Each pair of oars moves together. Each child and their soul are connected, working as one, going somewhere. Bart is alone. He calls out to the other boats. Nobody responds. They are not ignoring him. They simply cannot hear him. They are complete in a way he is not, and that completeness means they exist in a slightly different world than he does. He rows by himself through the gray nothing and watches his classmates move away from him, each one whole, each one paired with something he sold for $5 on a Sunday morning because he wanted to win an argument. This dream sequence is drawn simply. There are no elaborate visuals. There are no frightening images. It is just gray water and small boats and children who have something Bart does not. But the simplicity is the point. The show strips everything away and leaves you with the loneliness of it. Bart, in his dream, is the only person who is incomplete. He is the only one who is missing the thing that makes him fully himself, and he is alone in that, and nobody can hear him. He wakes up from the dream and he is scared in a way he cannot shake. What Bart does next is the moment that makes this episode genuinely unlike anything else the show produced in its run. He prays. Bart Simpson, who put rock lyrics in a church hymn book that same morning, who argues against the existence of souls as a party trick, who has spent his entire life treating religion as something other people do, gets down and prays. He asks God to help him get his soul back. He means it completely. There is nothing clever about it. There is no joke at the end of it. He is a 10-year-old boy in the dark, asking for help with something he should never have given away. The show does not make fun of this moment. That is the most important thing to understand about it. The Simpsons is a comedy. It has made jokes about religion and prayer and faith many times across its run. In this moment, it makes none. Bart's prayer is presented with complete seriousness. The camera does not wink at the audience. The music does not undercut the scene. The show simply lets Bart pray and lets the moment be what it is. The resolution comes through Lisa. She has been watching her brother throughout the episode, and she has understood what is happening even if she has not said it out loud. She takes her allowance money and she goes looking for the soul on her own. She tracks down whoever bought it from the stranger at the mall. She finds the piece of paper. She uses her own money she earned and saved, to buy back her brother's soul and brings it home to him. When Bart touches the paper, the change is immediate and visible. His body relaxes. Something in his face shifts. The absence that had been sitting behind his eyes throughout the episode is gone. He is whole again. He holds the paper and looks at his sister, and the show gives them a quiet moment together that it does not oversell or explain. But before Bart falls asleep that night, Lisa leaves him a note with the paper. She tells him that whether or not the soul is real, it is clear that a soul is something a person makes for themselves through the choices they make and the way they treat others. She is not lecturing him. She is telling him something true and small and important. And the episode ends on that. What makes Bart sells his soul so quietly disturbing is the weight it places on a transaction that should mean nothing. A boy writes his name on a piece of paper and hands it to his friend for $5. That should be a joke. That should be the setup for a prank or a scheme or a funny misunderstanding. Instead, the show treats it as a genuine loss. It shows you, in clear and simple terms, what it looks like when a person is missing the part of themselves that makes them fully real. It shows you the gray water and the empty boats and the child rowing alone, and it does not tell you it is just a dream. It lets you decide how real it is. The dream sequence and the prayer and the moment when Bart finally gets the paper back are the three most honest things the show ever gave this character. They are not funny. They are not trying to be. They are just true in the way that the best stories are true, and they leave a mark. The episode is disturbing because it takes something a child would actually do, sell something meaningless for a small amount of money to win an argument, and shows you the full weight of what that thing actually was. And it never lets you forget, not for a single scene, that the loss was real and that Bart felt every second of it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. While Bart sells his soul disturbs you by going inward, by pulling the camera into a child's loneliness and fear, the next section goes in the opposite direction entirely. Because the next episode on this list is not about what a character feels on the inside. It is about what it looks like when someone decides they are going to hunt you down, find you wherever you go, and kill you. And that someone is Sideshow Bob. Section 4. Cape Fear. The episode where Sideshow Bob stopped being funny and started being frightening. There's a difference between a villain and a threat. A villain is someone the story uses to create conflict. They show up, they cause problems, they get defeated, and the audience watches from a safe distance, knowing that the main character is going to be okay in the end. A threat is different. A threat is someone whose presence makes you genuinely uncomfortable. Someone where the outcome does not feel guaranteed. Someone whose eyes, when they look at the person they are after, carry something real and cold that does not disappear when the scene ends. Sideshow Bob had been a villain for years before Cape Fear, but in Cape Fear, he became a threat. And the difference between those two things is exactly what makes this episode so effective and so hard to shake. Cape Fear aired in 1993 during the 5th season of The Simpsons. Before this episode, Sideshow Bob had appeared twice. In his first appearance, he framed Krusty the Clown for armed robbery. In his second appearance, he tried to murder Selma Bouvier. Both of those episodes were funny and clever and used Bob as a sophisticated, theatrical villain who was ultimately undone by his own arrogance. He was never truly frightening in either of them. He was entertaining. He was well-spoken and dramatic, and he lost, and the audience laughed and moved on. Cape Fear changes all of that from its very first scene and never changes back. The episode opens with Bart receiving threatening letters. Not prank letters, not jokes. Letters written in blood, telling Bart that he is going to die. Bart reads one and his face goes white. He tries to figure out who sent them. He goes through a mental list of everyone who might want to hurt him, various people he has wronged over the years, and the list is long enough to be funny for a moment. But the joke does not last, because the show quickly reveals who is actually behind the letters, and the moment it does, the tone of the episode shifts completely and stays shifted for the rest of its runtime. The letters are from Sideshow Bob. He is in prison. He has been writing to Bart from his cell, in blood, to let Bart know that the moment he gets out, he intends to kill him. This is not a misunderstanding. This is not a plan that involves some other goal with Bart as an obstacle. Killing Bart is the entire plan. It is the only thing Bob wants. He has organized his entire existence in prison around this one intention, and when we first see him in his cell, everything about him communicates that the intention is serious. The FBI gets involved. 2 agents, Agent Malone and Agent Tesla, come to the Simpson house and explain the situation. They take the threat seriously in a way that the show uses to signal to the audience that they should too. These are federal agents treating a letter-writing prisoner as a genuine danger to a child's life. The comedy around them is light and situational, Homer being Homer in the presence of authority figures. But the agents themselves are not played for laughs. They are worried. That worry transfers to the audience. Bob's parole hearing is the scene that most people remember from the first half of the episode, and for good reason. Bob appears before the parole board in his prison uniform. He is calm, composed, and completely himself, well-spoken, precise, and utterly without remorse. The board asks him about a tattoo on his chest. The tattoo reads, "Die, Bart, die," in large, clear letters directly over his heart. The board wants to understand what this tattoo means and whether it indicates that Bob still poses a danger to Bart Simpson specifically. Bob tells them, without hesitation and without blinking, that "Die, Bart, die" is German. He explains that it means the Bart the. He lets this sit in the air for a moment, and one of the parole board members nods and says that, of course, no one who speaks German could be evil. The board releases him. This scene is funny. It is genuinely funny, and it is meant to be. But underneath the humor is something that the show is doing deliberately and carefully. The parole board has just let a man walk free who has a child's name tattooed on his chest above the word die, who has been sending letters written in blood from prison, who has previously attempted murder twice. They let him go because he gave them a thin, barely believable explanation for the tattoo, and they chose to accept it. The comedy of the scene is real. The horror underneath the comedy is also real. A system that is supposed to protect people has just released someone who is going to try to kill a 10-year-old boy, and it did so because it wanted an easy answer, and Bob gave it one. Bob walks out of prison and immediately begins hunting Bart. What follows is a sequence of scenes where the show demonstrates, one by one, that there is nowhere safe for Bart to be. Bob shows up everywhere. He is in the crowd at a parade. He is outside the window at night. He leaves a dead fish wrapped in Bart's jersey on the doorstep, which is a reference to a scene in The Godfather where a dead fish is used as a message that someone is going to be killed. The show expects you to know that reference, and if you do, the scene is chilling. If you do not, it is still clearly meant as a threat, and the image of Bart's own jersey wrapped around a dead fish sitting on the family's front step is not a comfortable one. The FBI decides that the only way to protect Bart is to give the entire family a new identity and move them somewhere Bob cannot find them. The Simpsons become the Thompsons. They are relocated to a houseboat on a body of water called Terror Lake. The name is not subtle. The show is not trying to be subtle. It is telling you directly where this is heading. And then comes the scene under the car. The family loads into their car to drive to Terror Lake. They pull out of the driveway. They drive through Springfield. They get onto the highway. They drive for a long time. They arrive at Terror Lake. They get out of the car. And as they unload their things and get settled into the houseboat, the camera drops below the car and shows you what has been under it the entire time. Sideshow Bob is strapped to the axle, face down, his body being dragged along the road for the entire length of the journey. His face is inches from the moving asphalt. His expression is not panicked or desperate. He is patient. He is enduring the scraping and the road rash and the discomfort of being dragged under a car for miles with the focused calm of a man who has decided that no amount of physical suffering will stop him from reaching his destination. He wanted to know where the family was going. This was the method he chose to find out. He chose it knowing exactly what it would feel like, and he chose it anyway. There is no comedic music under this scene. There is no joke inserted to soften what you are watching. The show simply shows you Sideshow Bob under the car, dragging across the road, waiting, and lets the image speak for itself. It is one of the most effectively disturbing single shots in the show's history because of what it tells you about Bob's psychology. This is a man who will do anything. Pain is not a deterrent. Distance is not a deterrent. Inconvenience is not a deterrent. He decided he was going to find out where Bart was going, and he found out. That is all. That is the whole scene. He found out. The family settles into the houseboat, thinking they are safe. They are not safe. Bob finds them almost immediately. He rows a small boat to the houseboat at night. He boards it quietly. He finds Bart alone on the deck. He has a large knife. He tells Bart that it is time. that everything he has been building toward, the letters, the parole, the drive, all of it has been leading to this moment. Bart is going to die tonight. This is the point in the episode where Bart does the only thing he can think of to stall. He is a child alone on a boat in the dark with a man who has been trying to kill him for years and who has a knife in his hand. There is no one close enough to help him. There is no escape route that makes sense. So Bart asks Bob if he can have one last request before he dies. Bob, being Bob, agrees, and Bart asks him to sing the entire score of a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta called HMS Pinafore before killing him. Bob stares at him for a moment, and then he begins to sing. This is where the episode finds its release valve. Bob sings the entire operetta all the way through, every song, every part, performing it with full commitment on the deck of a houseboat in the middle of the night. It takes long enough that the houseboat drifts through the night and into Springfield's city limits, where police are waiting. Bob is arrested mid-performance. Bart is safe. The humor of this resolution is real, and it works. Bob being physically incapable of refusing an appreciative audience, even when he is in the middle of attempting murder, is a perfect character joke. It fits everything we know about him. It is funny. But what the episode has done before it gets to that resolution is the reason Cape Fear belongs on a list of the show's most disturbing episodes. It spent its entire runtime establishing Bob as a genuine threat in a way that went beyond what any previous villain on the show had managed. It showed you a man with a child's name tattooed on his chest. It showed you a system releasing that man back into the world because he gave a convenient answer. It showed you that man under a car, dragging across miles of asphalt, waiting. It showed you a child alone in the dark on a boat with a knife pointed at him. Kelsey Grammer's voice performance throughout the episode is central to why it works as well as it does. Grammer had voiced Bob before, but in Cape Fear, he plays him differently. There is no warmth in the performance. There is no theatrical enjoyment in the early scenes. There is just a flat, cold certainty. Bob is going to do what he came to do. He has already decided. The only question is when. That certainty is what separates Cape Fear from every other Sideshow Bob episode. In the others, you always feel like Bob might fail. In this one, until the very last moment, you are not sure. And that small window of genuine uncertainty, that brief feeling that maybe this is the episode where the show does something it cannot take back, is exactly what makes it work as horror rather than just as comedy with a dark twist. Sideshow Bob never felt more real than he did in this episode. And real danger, even in a cartoon, even wrapped in Gilbert and Sullivan and parole board jokes, still lands the way real danger is supposed to land. Cape Fear is frightening because it understands that the scariest version of a threat is one that is patient. Bob does not rush. He does not panic. He waits under a car, and he endures, and he follows. And when he finally has Bart where he wants him, he is completely calm about it. That kind of calm, in a person who wants to hurt you, is more frightening than any amount of shouting or running or dramatic music. It is the calm that tells you the person has already decided, and that nothing you do is going to change their mind. __quote _5 __. As relentless and frightening as Sideshow Bob is throughout Cape Fear, the next section shifts to a different kind of dread altogether. Because while Bob is a threat you can see coming, the horror in the next episode is something far harder to protect yourself from. It is the kind of horror that hides in a place where no one can reach you, and it wears the face of something you would never expect. Section 5, Treehouse of Horror 4, The Gremlin on the Bus, and the Horror of Not Being Believed. There is a specific kind of fear that does not get talked about enough. It is not the fear of something chasing you or something trying to hurt you. It is the fear of seeing something real and terrifying and turning to the person next to you to warn them and having them look right through you like you said nothing at all. It is the fear of being completely alone with the truth, of watching something dangerous happen and being dismissed, ignored, and ultimately removed from the situation entirely while the danger continues unchecked. That is the fear that sits at the center of Terror at 5.5 Feet, the second segment of Treehouse of Horror 4, and it is the reason this segment has stayed with people far longer than most horror content aimed at children has any right to. Treehouse of Horror 4 aired in 1993 during the 5th season of The Simpsons. It contains 3 segments, and all 3 have moments worth discussing, but Terror at 5.5 Feet is the one that operates most effectively as genuine horror. The other 2 segments, one about Bart making a deal with the devil over a donut, and one about Mr. Burns as a vampire, use their horror premises primarily as setups for jokes. Terror at 5.5 Feet uses its horror premise as the actual point. The laughs are still there, but they are built around a structure of real dread that the show commits to from the first scene to the last image. And that last image is one of the darkest single frames the show ever produced. The segment begins before the school bus even appears. Bart is asleep and he is dreaming. In the dream, he is on a school bus with his classmates. The bus is driving normally, everyone is seated, and then without warning, the bus swerves off the road and crashes. The dream cuts off at the moment of impact. Bart wakes up in his bed, gasping, his heart pounding, his mind full of the image of the crash. He sits in the dark of his room and tells himself it was just a dream. He tells himself it means nothing. He gets ready for school. He gets on the bus. The school bus in this segment is the same one from the dream. Same seats, same classmates, same route. Bart sits down and tries to settle into a normal morning. He looks out the window, and that is when he sees it. On the outside of the bus, clinging to the body of the vehicle just below the window line, is a small creature. It is roughly the size of a large cat. Its body is pale and slightly wet-looking, like something that lives somewhere dark and damp. Its face is wide and flat, with enormous pale eyes that sit too far apart on its head. Its mouth is too large for its face, and when it opens, the teeth inside are uneven and numerous. It is not cute. It is not designed to be funny. It is designed to be wrong in a way that your eyes recognize before your brain catches up. Something about its proportions and the way it moves tells you immediately that this thing should not exist, and that its existence is specifically bad news for you. The gremlin is pulling apart the bus. It tears out bolts and drops them onto the road below. It pulls at wires along the outside of the vehicle. It works with a focused, deliberate efficiency that makes it clear this is not random damage. It knows what it is doing. It is taking the bus apart piece by piece while the bus is moving, while the children inside are sitting completely unaware. And it is doing so with something that looks almost like enjoyment. Bart stares at it. He cannot speak for a moment. Then he grabs the arm of the kid sitting next to him and points out the window. The kid looks. The gremlin has already pressed itself flat against the bus, out of sight. The kid sees nothing. He looks at Bart and decides Bart is either joking or losing his mind. He turns back around. This is the pattern the segment will follow for its entire runtime, and the pattern is what makes it horrifying. Every time Bart tries to get another person to look at the gremlin hides. Every time an adult turns toward the window, the creature has already moved. Every time Bart points and shouts, the window shows nothing but road and sky. The adults on the bus, the driver and a chaperone, become increasingly concerned not about the outside of the bus, but about Bart. He is shouting. He is pointing at nothing. He is grabbing people and demanding they look at something they cannot see. From the outside, he appears to be in the middle of some kind of episode. Bart knows he is not. He can see the gremlin every time the adults look away. The moment their attention moves elsewhere, the creature reappears and goes back to its work. It is not hiding because it is afraid of being seen by adults. It is hiding because it understands exactly what will happen to Bart if adults look and find nothing there. It is not just dismantling the bus, it is dismantling Bart's credibility at the same time. Both acts are deliberate. Both acts are working perfectly. The gremlin looks at Bart while it works. This is the detail that elevates the segment from a simple monster story to something more genuinely disturbing. The creature does not ignore Bart. It watches him. It grins at him. It is aware of exactly what it is doing to him, and it finds this awareness satisfying. There is an intelligence behind those pale eyes that is not mindless animal behavior. The gremlin has chosen Bart specifically as its witness. It wants him to see. It wants him to tell people and have no one believe him. The terror it is creating is not just physical, it is psychological, and it is targeted. Bart's panic rises with every failed attempt to convince someone. He points at the gremlin to the bus driver. The bus driver looks. Nothing there. He points at it to Otto, who is driving. Otto turns, sees nothing, and turns back. The adults exchange looks over Bart's head. Their expressions have moved from mild concern to something more serious. This child is not doing well. There is a fire safety kit mounted inside the bus. It contains a small emergency flare. Bart grabs it. His plan is simple. He will throw the flare at the gremlin, mark it somehow, make it visible, give the adults something concrete to see. He opens the window. He throws the flare. He misses the gremlin entirely. The flare hits Hans Moleman, who is in a small car driving alongside the bus. Hans Moleman's car immediately catches fire, and he screams as his vehicle careers off the road. This does not help Bart's situation. The bus stops. The adults remove Bart. They strap him to a gurney. They call an ambulance. Bart is being taken away from the bus, away from his classmates, away from any ability to stop what the gremlin is doing, and he is secured to a stretcher so that he cannot move or point or demonstrate anything. He is completely powerless. The last thing he can do is look. As the ambulance pulls away and the bus drives off in the other direction, Bart turns his head to watch it go. The gremlin is sitting on top of the ambulance now. It has followed him. It is not on the bus anymore. It is here, right above him, and it is looking down at him with that wide, flat, too large smile, and in its hands it is holding something. It is Ned Flanders' severed head. The gremlin holds the head up and waves it at Bart. It grins. Ned's head grins too, in the blank, fixed way that severed heads grin in animated horror segments. The gremlin waves the head back and forth at Bart, the way you would wave at a friend from across the street. A cheerful, familiar gesture, performed with a dead man's head, directed at a child strapped to a gurney, who cannot move or scream effectively, or make anyone understand what is happening to him. The segment ends there. There is no resolution. There is no moment where Bart is believed, and the gremlin is exposed, and everything is set right. Ned Flanders is apparently dead, decapitated by a creature that no adult has acknowledged exists. The bus is still on the road with a dismantled exterior, carrying children who have no idea what was happening outside their windows. And Bart is in an ambulance, strapped down, watching a gremlin wave a severed head at him while the vehicle drives him away from any possibility of doing anything about any of it. This ending is the reason the segment disturbs people so thoroughly. Most horror stories, even dark ones, give the audience some form of release at the end. The monster is defeated, the truth comes out, the protagonist survives, and the danger is contained. Terror at 5.5 feet gives you none of that. It ends at the worst possible moment, with the worst possible image, and then it stops. The gremlin wins, Bart loses, the adults were wrong and will likely never know it, and Ned Flanders is dead in the most casual, absurd, and irreversible way imaginable. What the segment understands, and what makes it work as well as it does, is that the horror it is built around is not primarily about the gremlin. The gremlin is the vehicle. The actual horror is about being a child who tells the truth and is not believed by any adult in a position to help. This is a fear that every child either has experienced or can immediately imagine experiencing. The feeling of seeing something real and having the people around you decide that you are the problem rather than the thing you are pointing at. The feeling of being removed from a situation you are trying to fix because your removal is more convenient than anyone actually checking whether you might be right. The gremlin makes it literal and visual and animated, but the emotion underneath it, the complete helplessness of being dismissed by people who have the power to help and choose not to, is entirely real. Children watching this segment in 1993 did not need to be told why it was upsetting. They felt it immediately because they recognized it. They had all been Bart on that bus at some point. They had all pointed at something real and been told they were imagining things. They had all felt the guardrails of adult authority closing around them, while the thing they were pointing at continued unchecked. The Twilight Zone episode that this segment is based on, called Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, works on exactly the same principle. A man on a plane sees a creature on the wing. No one believes him. He is the only one who can see it. He is the only one who knows what is happening. The Simpsons honors that premise faithfully and then pushes it further in the final image. The Twilight Zone episode ends with some evidence that the man was right. The wing is damaged. There is proof. Terror at 5.5 feet ends with a severed head. It ends with the gremlin free and victorious and cheerful. It ends with Bart going away and the danger staying. There is no proof. There is no acknowledgement. There is just the gremlin, grinning, waving its trophy at the one child who could see it. The gremlin's design deserves a moment on its own, because it was crafted with a specific intention that the animators committed to fully. It is not meant to be funny ugly, the way many cartoon monsters are designed, exaggerated in a way that signals the audience to find them entertaining rather than threatening. It is meant to be wrong ugly. Every feature is slightly too far from where it should be. The eyes are too pale and too spread. The mouth opens too wide and contains too many teeth at slightly wrong angles. The body has a damp, unhealthy quality to it. When it moves efficiently rather than comically. It does not stumble or bumble. It works. It plans. It watches. The design is the physical expression of something that is specifically, deliberately, purposefully bad for you. Something that has chosen you and is enjoying the experience. That combination, a monster that is intelligently targeting you in a situation where no adult will believe you, ending on an image with no resolution and no safety, is what makes Terror at 5.5 feet stand apart from almost every other piece of animated content produced for general audiences in the early 1990s. It played in the same time slot as family comedies. It was part of a show that made people laugh every week. And it produced something that a significant number of people who watched it as children still think about when they think about things that unsettled them before they were old enough to fully understand why. The gremlin won. That is the whole story. The gremlin won, and the boy who knew about it got strapped to a gurney and driven away. And the last thing he saw was the proof of it being waved at him by something that was smiling. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. As disturbing as it is to watch a child be completely failed by every adult around him in a supernatural setting, the next section moves into something that hits even closer to home, because the next episode is not about a monster from outside. It is about an entire community turning on one of its own children in the most real and painful way the show ever depicted. And it does not need a single supernatural element to be the most deeply upsetting episode on this entire list. Section 6. The Boys of Bummer. The episode where Springfield tried to break a child. There is an unspoken agreement that exists between a television show and its audience. The agreement is simple. No matter how bad things get for the characters, no matter how much the story puts them through, there is a floor, a lowest point that the show will not go past. A line that exists to protect the audience from feeling genuinely uncomfortable rather than just dramatically engaged. Family comedies have a very clear version of this agreement. The characters can fail. They can be embarrassed. They can lose things and feel bad about it, but they cannot be truly destroyed. Not really. Not in a way that feels real enough to leave a mark. The Boys of Bummer is the episode where the Simpsons tore that agreement up in front of you and did not apologize for it. This episode aired in 2007 during the 18th season of the show. By this point, The Simpsons had been running for nearly 2 decades. The audience knew the rules. They had watched hundreds of episodes and understood, in the comfortable way you understand something you have seen confirmed over and over, that the show would not cross certain lines. Bart could get in trouble. Bart could fail. But Bart was going to be okay because Bart was always okay. That was the deal. The Boys of Bummer breaks the deal in its first act, and does not fully repair it even by the end. The episode begins with a Little League baseball game. Springfield's team is in the championship. The game comes down to a single moment, a fly ball heading into the outfield. Bart is positioned to catch it. The whole game, the whole championship, the whole season is sitting in that fly ball. Bart gets under it. He reaches up. And he drops it. Springfield loses. This is a simple, ordinary failure. Dropping a catch in a baseball game is the kind of thing that happens all the time at every level of the sport. Professional players drop catches in championship games. It is part of sport. It is understood to be part of sport. Children drop catches. That is one of the reasons children's sports exist, so that children can fail in a safe environment, learn from it, and move on. That is how it is supposed to work. Springfield does not let it work that way. The reaction from the crowd is immediate and total. The people in the stands do not groan and go home disappointed. They do not give Bart a moment to feel bad before moving on. They turn on him. Right there, in the stands, in the immediate aftermath of the game, Springfield decides that Bart Simpson is responsible for everything, and that responsibility requires punishment. The punishment they choose is to make Bart feel as bad as it is possible for a human being to feel, for as long as it takes to satisfy them. What follows in the episode's first act is one of the most sustained depictions of community cruelty the show ever produced. It is not a single scene of mockery followed by a resolution. It is scene after scene after scene, each one showing a different face of the same collective decision that Springfield has made about Bart. The town has decided he deserves to suffer, and it is going to make sure he does. Buildings in Springfield have "Bart sucks" painted on them in large letters. This is not graffiti from one angry fan. This is widespread enough that it appears on multiple structures across town, which means multiple people made the decision to go out and write it, in public, permanently, about a child. Citizens shout insults at Bart on the street when he passes. Adults who have known Bart his whole life treat him with open contempt. People who have never had any strong feelings about Bart one way or the other have adopted the town's position and joined in. His own teammates refuse to acknowledge him. Boys his own age who played the same game with him, who lost the same championship, who are just as much a part of the loss as he is, turn their backs on him completely. They are not just distant, they actively participate in the rejection. Bart walks through his town and his school and every environment he normally occupies and finds the same thing everywhere he goes. Everyone has decided. Everyone agrees. He dropped the ball, and now he is nothing. Marge tries to defend him. This is worth noting because Marge's attempts to stand up for Bart are written with real urgency. She is not casually brushing off the town's behavior. She is genuinely disturbed by it, and she tries to intervene in multiple situations. She talks to neighbors. She confronts people who are shouting at her son. She tries to use reason and kindness to redirect what is happening. It does not work. The town is not interested in reason. The decision has been made collectively, and collectively it is being maintained, and no single voice pushing back against it, even a mother's voice, is going to change that. This is one of the episode's most quietly devastating details. In most Simpsons episodes where the family faces a crisis, Marge is the anchor. She is the person who holds things together, who finds the right words, who makes the situation survivable by being present and warm and steady. In The Boys of Bummer, Marge is present and warm and steady, and it makes no difference at all. She cannot protect her son from what Springfield is doing to him, because what Springfield is doing to him is too big and too widespread and too determined. The town has more power than one mother's love in this particular episode, and the show does not flinch from showing you that. Bart absorbs all of this. He is 10 years old and his entire community has turned against him over a dropped baseball. He goes to school and the mockery continues. He goes home and it follows him. He goes outside and it finds him immediately. There is nowhere in Springfield that is safe for him right now. There is no corner of the town that has not already received the message about who he is and what he did and what the appropriate response is. He is surrounded by it on every side and there is no way through and no way out. He climbs the Springfield water tower. He stands at the top and he looks down and he stands on the edge. The episode does not hide what this moment is. It does not frame it as a stunt or a gesture or a scheme. Bart is on the water tower because the weight of what the town has done to him has become too heavy to carry and he has run out of places to go. He has been stripped of every environment that made him who he was. He has been told by the people around him over and over, in public and in private, through words and through silence, that he is worthless. He is 10 years old, and he has been told this so many times in such a short period by so many different people that he has nowhere left inside himself to put the information. He stands on the edge of the water tower. What happens next is the moment the episode draws the most attention to. The town is below him. People are gathered in the street looking up at him, and some of them are still mocking him. He is standing on the edge of a water tower in a way that makes his intentions clear, and people in the crowd below are still shouting insults up at him. Still, even now. Even with Bart standing there, at the edge, in the way that he is standing there, some portion of Springfield has decided that this too is just another opportunity to tell him what they think of him. This scene is not played for laughs. There is no comedic music under it. There is no joke positioned at the right moment to release the tension and let the audience breathe. The show makes a decision in this scene to let it be what it is without softening it. Bart is a child on a water tower in crisis, and the people who put him there are still going. That is what is on the screen, and the show just lets it sit there. He is talked down. The resolution comes in the second half of the episode, where Marge decides that the town is going to fix what it broke. She forces the issue. She organizes a public apology. Springfield's residents are made to stand in front of Bart one by one and tell him they are sorry. They do it. The apology is issued. It is public and it is complete, and Bart receives it. But the episode's damage is already done, and both the audience and the characters seem to understand this. An apology at the end of what Bart went through in the first act is not a restoration. It is an acknowledgement that something was broken. You can acknowledge a broken thing and still be left with a broken thing. The apology tells Bart that the town was wrong. It does not undo the days he spent walking through his own neighborhood while people shouted at him. It does not undo the moment on the water tower. It does not undo whatever happened inside him during the period between dropping the ball and standing on that ledge. The hollow quality of the resolution is part of what makes The Boys of Bummer so disturbing to revisit. Most Simpsons resolutions feel genuinely reset. The problem is solved, the characters go back to baseline, the next episode starts fresh. This resolution does not fully feel that way. It has the shape of a resolution without the emotional weight of one. The town says sorry, the credits roll. But the first act is still the first act. What this episode is doing, at its core, is something very specific and very uncomfortable. It is taking the concept of mob mentality, the way a group of people can collectively decide on a target and pursue that target with a cruelty that none of them would be capable of individually, and applying it to a child in a setting that is supposed to be safe. Springfield is not supposed to be a place where a 10-year-old boy gets psychologically dismantled by his entire community over a baseball game. Springfield is a cartoon town full of familiar faces and warm yellows and simple problems that get resolved in 22 minutes. The show takes that familiar, comfortable setting and fills it with something genuinely ugly. It takes all those familiar faces, the neighbors, the classmates, the citizens, the people you have watched for years doing silly cartoon things, and it gives them a target and it shows you what they do when they have one. And what they do is not silly or cartoon. What they do is the thing that groups of real people do to individual people who are perceived as having failed or transgressed. They pile on. They dehumanize. They keep going even when the target has nothing left. The reason this episode is discussed so often in conversations about the show going too far is not because it is the darkest thing the show ever produced in terms of imagery or concept. Other episodes on this list go further in those terms. The reason it is discussed is because it feels real in a way that is hard to dismiss. The gremlin on the bus is disturbing because it is specific and strange and animated. The town of Springfield turning on Bart in The Boys of Bummer is disturbing because it is not strange at all. It is ordinary. It is the kind of thing that happens to real people in real life places when a crowd decides it has permission to be cruel. The episode understands that. The writers knew what they were making, and they made it anyway, inside a family comedy that was supposed to be about a lovable troublemaker and his ridiculous family. They put a child on a water tower, and they put his tormentors below him, still shouting, and they let the camera sit on it. That is what makes it land the way it does, not the extremity of it, the familiarity of it. __quote_7__. While The Boys of Bummer disturbs you by taking something completely ordinary, a sports loss, a town, a crowd, and showing you what it can do to a single child, the next section goes somewhere entirely different. Because the next episode on this list is disturbing not because of what happens to anyone inside the show, but because of what happened to the episode itself after it aired, and the reason it was pulled from every screen in the world and made impossible to watch through any official channel. Section 7. Stark Raving Dad, the episode that no longer officially exists. There are episodes of television that disturb you because of what happens inside them. There are episodes that disturb you because of how dark they are willing to go with their characters or their stories. And then there is a much rarer category. Episodes that disturb you because of what happened to them after they were made. Episodes where the real world reached into the history of a show and changed the meaning of something that had existed for years, turning a piece of entertainment into something far more complicated and far harder to look at directly. Stark Raving Dad is that kind of episode. It is disturbing on multiple levels that operate completely independently of each other, and when you stack those levels together, you end up with something that sits in a category entirely its own in the show's history. Stark Raving Dad aired in September 1991. It was the first episode of the third season of The Simpsons. At the time of its airing, it was one of the most talked about episodes the show had ever produced, for reasons that had nothing to do with darkness or horror or any of the things that make the other episodes on this list what they are. People talked about it because of a voice. A single, unmistakable voice coming out of a character on screen who was claiming to be someone the whole world knew. The combination of that voice, that claim, and the story built around both of them made Stark Raving Dad an event episode, the kind of television moment that people called each other about and discussed at school and work the next morning. The episode begins with Homer Simpson going to work at the Springfield nuclear power plant. He fills out a psychological evaluation form that the plant requires its employees to complete. The form contains a series of questions designed to measure whether an employee is mentally stable enough to work around nuclear material. Homer fills the form out the way Homer fills everything out, without much thought, following whatever impulse strikes him in the moment. His answers raise serious flags. The plant systems review the completed form and determine that Homer Simpson is potentially dangerous. A company psychiatrist reviews the results and signs off on an involuntary commitment order. Homer is sent to a mental health facility called the New Directions Rehabilitation Center. He did not choose to go. He was not given a hearing. He was not given the opportunity to explain himself or contest the decision or have anyone genuinely evaluate whether he posed a real risk. A form was filled out, a psychiatrist signed a document without sitting down with Homer in person, and Homer was removed from his life and placed in an institution. The whole process is presented as something that just happens, smoothly and efficiently, and completely without regard for whether the person being committed actually needs to be there. This detail, the ease of it, the speed of it, the absence of any real safeguard between Homer answering questions on a form and Homer being locked in a facility, is quietly one of the most disturbing things about the episode's first act. The show is not playing this purely for comedy. It is showing you that the system designed to identify people who need help can be triggered by a form, approved by someone who never met you, and executed before you fully understand what is happening. Homer is confused throughout the process. He does not understand why he is there or exactly what he did that put him there. He is just there, and the institution is real, and the walls are real, and there is a period of time during which he has no clear path back to his family. Inside the facility, Homer is placed in a room. His roommate is a large man. The man is big, wide, and physically imposing. Not threatening, just physically significant in a way the show makes clear from the moment he appears on screen. The man tells Homer his name is Leon Kompowski. He tells Homer that he is from Paterson, New Jersey. And then he tells Homer something else. He tells him that he is Michael Jackson. Now, at this point in 1991, Michael Jackson was the most famous person on Earth. This is not an exaggeration. He had been a global superstar since childhood, first with the Jackson 5, and then as a solo artist. Thriller, his 1982 album, had become the best-selling album in history. He was known everywhere, recognized everywhere, discussed everywhere. When Leon Kompowski, sitting in a mental institution, tells Homer Simpson that he is Michael Jackson, it lands as a joke immediately. The gap between this large man in a white institution uniform and the image of Michael Jackson that the world carried in 1991 is wide enough to be funny on its own. But then Leon speaks again, and the voice that comes out of him is not the voice of a large man from Paterson, New Jersey, performing an impression. It is a voice that the entire audience knows immediately and completely. The speaking voice of Michael Jackson, calm and soft and precise, coming from a character on an animated television show in a moment that stopped people in living rooms across the country. The voice was real. Michael Jackson performed Leon Kompowski's speaking voice in this episode. He did so under a pseudonym. The credits for the episode listed the character's voice as being provided by someone called John J. Smith. This was not a real person. It was the name Jackson used to participate in the episode without it being formally announced in advance. The singing voice in the episode, used when Leon and Bart write and perform a birthday song for Lisa, was provided by a different performer who sounded similar to Jackson. But the speaking voice, the one that filled living rooms and made people stop what they were doing, was Jackson himself. This was confirmed over the years by multiple people involved with the show's production. The arrangement was unusual, and the secrecy around it was intentional. Jackson wanted to participate in the episode without the appearance generating a level of publicity that would overshadow the story itself. The pseudonym was the solution. For years, the question of whether it was really Jackson was discussed and debated, and eventually the answer was confirmed clearly. It was him. He made the calls. He recorded the lines. Leon Kompowski speaks in Michael Jackson's voice because Michael Jackson was in the recording booth making it happen. The story the episode tells is, on its surface, a warm one. Homer and Leon develop a genuine friendship inside the facility. Leon is kind to Homer. He helps Homer think through his relationship with Bart, which has been strained. When Homer eventually gets out and brings Leon home with him, the facility releasing Leon because he has stopped claiming to be Michael Jackson, having apparently responded well to treatment, the story shifts to Bart and Lisa. Bart has forgotten Lisa's birthday. This is not a small oversight. He forgot it completely. Lisa's birthday came and went while Bart was caught up in his own things, and he did not acknowledge it at all. Lisa is hurt in a real way. The episode gives her genuine disappointment without turning it into a big dramatic confrontation. She is just a little girl who is not remembered on her birthday by her brother, and the quiet sadness of that is handled with more care than you might expect from a show primarily built around comedy. Leon helps Bart write a birthday song for Lisa. The two of them work on it together. The song they write is simple and sincere. When Bart performs it for Lisa, the moment lands not as a comedy payoff, but as a genuine emotional one. Lisa is moved. The relationship between the two siblings is briefly restored through something small and real and personal. It is one of the warmer moments in the show's early seasons. Leon then walks away. His purpose, whatever it was, however you want to understand what he was and why he was in that institution and why he left the way he did, has been fulfilled. He tells Homer that when he was speaking in his normal voice as Leon Kompowski from Paterson, New Jersey, nobody listened to him. When he spoke in the voice of Michael Jackson, people paid attention. They talked to him. They responded. The voice was a tool he used to get people to engage with him, and now that the tool had served its purpose, he did not need it anymore. He walks down the road. The episode ends. This is where the story inside the episode stops, and where the story outside it begins. In 2019, a documentary called Leaving Neverland was released. The documentary featured two men, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, who described in detail being sexually abused by Michael Jackson when they were children. The documentary was lengthy and detailed and deeply serious, and its release had an immediate and significant effect on how the world related to Michael Jackson's legacy and anything connected to it. The producers of The Simpsons made a decision quickly after the documentary's release. James L. Brooks, one of the show's original creators and producers, confirmed publicly that Stark Raving Dad would be removed from circulation. It would not air in syndication. It would not be available on Disney+, where the show's entire library had been placed when that platform launched. It would not be officially distributed through any channel going forward. The episode was pulled. Not edited, not modified, pulled completely. An episode that had existed for nearly 3 decades, that had been broadcast hundreds of times in dozens of countries, that had been released on DVD sets, that had been part of the show's permanent record for the entire span of many people's adult lives, was removed from the official history of the show. You cannot watch it on any platform that has the rights to the show. You cannot find it in official releases. It exists in the informal, unofficial spaces where things that have been pulled from circulation tend to end up, but through no sanctioned channel. This decision and its result add a layer to the episode that no other episode in the show's history carries. Every other episode, no matter how dark or disturbing, can be watched. You can go back to it, you can sit with it and think about it and discuss it with people who have seen it. Stark Raving Dad cannot be revisited that way anymore. It exists now in a strange, in-between place. Too famous to pretend it never happened, too connected to something deeply serious to be treated as ordinary entertainment, and completely unavailable through any legitimate means of watching. The institutionalization of Homer through a process with no real safeguards. A large man in a mental facility who speaks in the most recognizable voice in the world. A story about a forgotten birthday and a brother who did not remember his sister. A warm ending. And then, nearly 30 years later, a decision that turned all of it into something that officially no longer exists. The disturbing layers here do not cancel each other out. They sit on top of each other. The episode is uncomfortable in one direction because of what it shows about how easily a person can be removed from their life by institutional processes. It is uncomfortable in another direction entirely because of what the world learned about the man whose voice defined it. And it is uncomfortable in a third direction because of what it means for a piece of art to be removed from circulation, what that act says about accountability and legacy, and the way real-world darkness attaches itself to things that were made in innocence. All 3 of those discomforts are present every time you think about this episode. None of them resolve. They just sit there together, which is its own kind of unsettling. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. As strange and complicated as Stark Raving Dad becomes when you look at all of it at once, the next section returns to the Treehouse of Horror for one of the most disturbing origin stories the show ever constructed. Because the next episode on this list asks you to feel genuine sympathy for a monster before it asks you to be afraid of him. And the reason he became a monster is one of the ugliest things the show ever put on screen. Section 8, Treehouse of Horror 6, The Man Who Burned Alive While Parents Argued About Milk. Most horror stories give you a monster and ask you to be afraid of it. They do not spend much time on where the monster came from or what it was before it became something dangerous. The backstory, if it exists at all, is usually brief. A quick explanation that gives the monster a reason to exist before the story gets back to the part where it chases people. The monster is the point. Everything else is setup. Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace, the second segment of Treehouse of Horror 6, does something completely different. It gives you a monster. It makes the monster genuinely frightening. It puts children in real danger and builds genuine suspense around whether they are going to survive. But before it does any of that, it stops and shows you exactly what this monster was before it became a monster. It shows you a man at a meeting, trying to tell the people in the room something important, being ignored completely, and burning to death in front of them while they continue their argument. And by the time the segment is done with that backstory, you do not just fear the monster, you understand it. You might even think, in a quiet part of yourself, that the show is specifically trying to reach that the monster is not entirely wrong. Treehouse of Horror 6 aired in October 1995 during the 7th season of The Simpsons. The episode contains 3 segments, and all 3 have moments worth discussing, but Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace is the one that has the most complete structure as a piece of horror storytelling. It uses its parody of A Nightmare on Elm Street as a frame, but what it builds inside that frame is something that goes beyond parody. It is a story about what happens when institutional negligence creates irreversible damage, and what the victim of that negligence decides to do once they have nothing left to lose. The segment opens the way many horror stories open, with a child having a nightmare. Martin Prince, one of Bart's classmates at Springfield Elementary, is running through a dreamscape. The environment around him is fluid and strange, the way dreams are, shifting and unstable, with the logic of a sleeping mind rather than a waking one. Something is chasing him. He runs as hard as he can. He cannot get away. He is caught. The segment shows you the aftermath rather than the act itself. Martin reduced to a pile of mashed potatoes on the floor of a dream cafeteria, his glasses sitting on top of the pile, his clothes empty beside it. He is gone. Not injured, gone, replaced by food in the specific and horrible way that only a dream could execute an act of violence. Martin dies in his sleep. He goes to bed a child and does not wake up. This sends Springfield Elementary into a state of fear immediately. Word spreads among the students that something killed Martin in his dream. The children begin comparing notes. They establish that whatever is killing them is operating inside their dreams, which means there is no safe place. You can run from things in the waking world. You can lock doors and turn on lights and call for help. You cannot do any of those things when you are asleep. Sleep is the one state that every living person has to enter every single night without exception. If the threat lives there, in the place you have to go whether you want to or not, then there is nowhere to hide. Bart and Lisa investigate. They dig into the history of the school. They ask questions and follow the trail. And eventually, they find the answer. And the answer is groundskeeper Willie. Willie has been killing Springfield children in their dreams. The segment frames this as the answer to the mystery before it pulls back and shows you something more complicated. The question of how Willie ended up this way, and what the school did to create the thing that is now destroying its students one by one while they sleep. The backstory is told in a flashback. Years ago, before any of this, groundskeeper Willie discovered that the boiler in the basement of Springfield Elementary was broken. This was not a minor maintenance issue. This was a serious mechanical failure in a piece of equipment that produced large amounts of heat inside a school building full of children. Willie understood the danger immediately. He knew what a broken boiler could do, and he knew that it needed to be reported and repaired before it hurt someone. He went to a parent-teacher association meeting. The meeting was already in progress when he arrived. The parents and teachers in the room were deep in a discussion about the school cafeteria. Specifically, they were arguing about chocolate milk. One faction wanted chocolate milk available to students. Another faction wanted only regular milk. The argument had the energy of something that had been going on for a while and had generated genuine heat on both sides. People had opinions. People were not going to back down easily from those opinions. Willie stood at the edge of the room and tried to get their attention. He told them he had something urgent to report. He told them the boiler was broken. He told them it was dangerous. He used the word dangerous. He was standing in a room full of parents who had come to a school meeting specifically because they cared about the children in this building. And he told them that there was a dangerous broken piece of equipment in the basement that needed their immediate attention. They told him to wait. The chocolate milk argument continued. Willie waited. He tried again. He was told to wait again. The argument about chocolate milk versus regular milk took priority over the man standing at the edge of the room telling them something was broken and dangerous in the building their children spent their days in. The priorities of the room were clear, and Willie was not among them. The boiler exploded. The segment does not cut away from what happens next. It shows it to you directly and holds on it long enough that you cannot look past it or dismiss it or process it as a quick visual gag. The boiler explodes and the fire reaches Willie, and Willie burns. He burns in front of the assembled parents and teachers and whatever children happen to be in the building at that moment. He is on fire, and the people in the room are watching him burn and not. One of them does anything to stop it. Willie burns alive in front of a room full of people who were too busy arguing about chocolate milk to listen to him when he tried to warn them. He burns because nobody in that room made the decision to prioritize a man telling them something was wrong over a discussion about what kind of milk children should have with their lunch. He burns because the system of adults responsible for the safety of a school chose, in the specific moment when their choice mattered most, to not hear him. And as he burns, with the fire consuming him and the people around him watching and doing nothing, Willie makes a declaration. He tells the assembled parents and teachers and children that he will be back. He tells them that he will haunt their children in their dreams, where the law cannot touch him. He tells them that he is going to kill their kids. He says this while he is on fire. He says this with the absolute certainty of a person who has nothing left and has just decided what they are going to do with the nothing they have been left with. This is the moment the segment becomes something more than a horror parody. Because Willie's declaration is not the raving of a madman. It is the statement of a person who just watched the direct consequences of being ignored and who is now choosing to direct his remaining energy at the people most connected to those consequences. He cannot hurt the parents directly. He is dying. But their children will grow up and go to sleep every night, and in the place where they sleep, he will be waiting. He will take from them what they took from him by arguing about milk while he burned. The logic is not sane. It is not just. Killing children for their parents' negligence is not a proportionate response to anything. But the segment earns the moment anyway because it has done its work carefully. It has shown you in clear and specific terms what happened to Willie and exactly why it happened. It did not make him a monster through supernatural accident or random evil. It made him a monster through a very specific chain of events that began with a broken boiler and ended with a room full of people choosing not to listen. The evil here has a clear point of origin. It was created by the adults in that room. It was created by the decision to argue about milk while a man tried to warn them. It was created by every second that ticked by while the boiler got worse and Willie stood at the edge of the meeting and waited for someone to prioritize him. The monster did not arrive from outside. The monster was made right there in a school meeting room by ordinary people making ordinary bad decisions. Once the segment establishes this backstory, it moves back to the present, where Willie is now hunting Springfield children in their dreams. The mechanics of his attack are taken directly from A Nightmare on Elm Street. He exists in the dream world and uses that space to kill children in ways that are impossible in the waking world. He can reshape the environment around him. He can appear without warning. He can become part of whatever the dreaming mind produces and turn it against the dreamer. Bart and Lisa figure out how to fight back against Willie in the dream world. Lisa transforms herself into a massive version of her mother and overpowers Willie physically. The segment ends with Willie being defeated, chased out of the dream space, and destroyed by Bart and Lisa working together. The immediate threat is resolved. Springfield's children can sleep again. But the resolution does not undo the backstory. The defeat of Willie in the dream world does not reach back through time and change what the parents did at that meeting. It does not unargue the chocolate milk debate. It does not pull Willie out of the fire and give him back the life that was taken from him by the moment when the room chose not to listen. The resolution is a resolution in the plot. In the meaning of the segment, it changes nothing. Willie was a normal man doing his job. He found something dangerous and he reported it to the people who needed to know. He was ignored in favor of something trivial. He was killed by the consequences of that indifference. He became a monster and he killed children in their sleep because of what was done to him. The monster in this segment is frightening. The dream sequences are effectively constructed, and Willie's presence in them carries real menace. But the most disturbing thing in Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace is not Willie in the dream world. It is Willie at the edge of that meeting room, trying to be heard, watching the seconds tick by, knowing something is wrong, and not being able to make a single person in the room care enough to stop arguing about milk and listen. That moment is the heart of the segment. Everything else, the dream deaths, the nightmare landscapes, the horror film references, is built on top of that moment. The show is saying something specific with it. It is saying that the most reliable way to create something truly dangerous is to take something ordinary and push it through enough institutional indifference until there is nothing left of it that resembles what it started as. Willie did not choose to become what he became. He was built into it, one ignored warning at a time, until the fire took him and the choice was made for him. Burning alive while people watch and do nothing is one of the most viscerally horrible images the show ever committed to a Treehouse of Horror segment. The show does not rush past it or reduce it to a quick flash. It holds on it long enough for you to understand what you are seeing. A man is dying. The people who could stop it are choosing not to. And the man, in his last moments, is not begging them to help. He is telling them what comes next. The children of Springfield paid the price for what the adults in that room chose to do. That is the story. It is wrapped in parody and dream sequences and cartoon logic, but underneath all of that is something that does not have a cartoon answer. Indifference creates damage. Damage does not disappear when the person who suffered it disappears. It finds somewhere else to go. And sometimes the somewhere else is the dreams of children who had nothing to do with any of it. __quote _9 ___. As deeply unsettling as Willie's origin is in this segment, the horror of being a victim before becoming a monster, the next section shifts to a different kind of loss entirely. Because the next episode on this list is not about transformation or revenge or supernatural horror. It is about the most ordinary and irreversible thing that can happen to any person or any character in any story. Someone dies, without warning, without meaning, and everything that made the world feel stable simply stops. Section 9. Alone Again, Natura-Diddily. The episode where the Simpsons killed someone and meant it. Most deaths in animated television do not mean anything. A character falls off a cliff and walks away. A character gets hit by a car and shows up in the next scene without a scratch. The world of the cartoon resets itself constantly, automatically, without anyone having to ask it to. This is the unspoken agreement that animation makes with its audience from the very beginning. Nothing that happens here is permanent. The world will be exactly the same tomorrow as it was today. You can watch without fear because the thing you are watching cannot actually lose anything that it will not have back by the time you tune in again. The Simpsons had operated on this agreement for 11 seasons. 11 years of Homer falling downstairs and getting back up. 11 years of Bart getting in trouble and escaping it. 11 years of the family facing crises that were real enough to generate drama, but never real enough to leave a permanent mark on the world of the show. The audience trusted this agreement completely. They had been given no reason not to. The show had kept its end of the deal for over a decade without exception. Alone Again, Natura-Diddily is the episode where the show broke that deal for the first time. It aired in February 2000 during the 11th season. When it was over, a character who had appeared in the show since its very first season was gone. Not gone in the cartoon way, where gone means temporarily absent and probably back next week. Gone in the real way. Dead. Permanently and irrevocably, and without any possibility of return. The world of the show was different after this episode than it had been before it, and it was never going to go back. And the way it happened, the specific, mundane, almost insultingly ordinary way that this character's life ended, is one of the most quietly disturbing choices the show ever made. The episode begins at a NASCAR race. The Simpsons and the Flanders family are in the stands together, watching the cars go around the track. The mood is light. This is a day out. People are eating and talking and enjoying themselves in the easy, uncomplicated way that people enjoy a sporting event on a nice day. There is nothing in the opening scenes of this episode that signals to the audience that anything significant is about to happen. There is no foreboding music. There is no moment where a character looks at someone else with an expression that might carry meaning later. There is no setup. The teams racing that day are using promotional mascots in the stands. The mascots are there to fire t-shirts into the crowd. This is a normal thing at American sporting events. The t-shirt cannon is a standard piece of promotional equipment used to get the crowd excited between moments of action. It is not a dangerous object. It is not treated as a dangerous object by anyone in the scene. It is just part of the atmosphere of a day at the races. Homer makes a request. He asks the mascots to fire t-shirts into his section of the stands. He wants a free t-shirt. This is exactly the kind of thing Homer would do, and the kind of thing the audience has seen Homer do 100 variations of across 11 seasons. He sees an opportunity for something free, and he takes it. There is nothing unusual about this. There is no reason for the audience to register it as anything other than a small Homer moment in the first act of an episode that will eventually be about something else. The mascots comply. They aim the cannon at Homer's section. The t-shirts fire. Maude Flanders stands up at the wrong moment. She has turned around for some reason. The specific reason is left unclear, which matters because the show is not trying to construct a meaningful reason. There is no meaningful reason. She simply stands up at the moment the t-shirts are fired into the stands. The shirts hit her. She is knocked backward by the force of them. She falls from the bleachers. She does not get back up. Maude Flanders is dead. She was killed by promotional t-shirts at a NASCAR race because she stood up at the wrong moment because Homer Simpson asked for free merchandise. That is the complete story of how she died. There is no more to it than that. The show does not linger on the moment of death in a dramatic way. It does not slow down and build to it. Maud stands up, the shirts hit her, she falls, and the scene moves on to deal with what comes next. The speed of it is part of what makes it so difficult to process. You are watching a comedy about a family going to a race, and then a character is dead, and the episode has to become a different kind of episode now. One about grief and loss, and a man who no longer knows how to exist without the person he built his entire life around. Ned Flanders is that man. Ned has been Homer's neighbor since the show began. He has appeared in hundreds of episodes. He is defined by his faith, his kindness, his relentless cheerfulness, and his complete inability to hold a grudge against Homer, no matter how many times Homer treats him badly. He is one of the most recognizable supporting characters in the show's history. And Maud has always been beside him, his wife, present in the background of countless scenes, part of the fabric of who Ned is and how his life works. Without Maud, none of that fabric holds together in the same way. The episode shows you what Ned looks like in the immediate aftermath of losing her, and what he looks like is a man who has had the center of his world removed and does not yet understand how to stand without it. He is not performing grief. He is not going through the motions of sadness in the way that secondary characters in television often do when the story requires them to be sad. He is genuinely lost. The show writes him with a specificity of detail that communicates clearly that the writers understood what this loss actually means for this particular person. Ned tries to function. He takes care of his boys, Rod and Todd. He goes through the routines of his daily life. But there are moments throughout the episode where the absence of Maud is right there on the surface, where Ned reaches for something that is no longer there and has to recalibrate in real time. These moments are small, and they are not underlined by the show. They are just present, the way real grief is present. Not in dramatic outbursts, but in the quiet moments when the world suddenly requires you to be without the person who was always there. The episode does not soften Ned's loss with comedy. This is a significant choice for a show that is, at its foundation, a comedy. The Simpsons has always used humor as a way to manage its darker moments, a well-placed joke that gives the audience permission to step back from something heavy and breathe for a moment. In Alone Again, Natura-Diddily, the humor is present in the episode, but it does not touch Ned's grief. The two things exist side by side without overlapping. The comedy goes on around Ned while Ned simply grieves, and the show respects the grief enough to leave it alone. The disturbing quality of this episode is not found in a single shocking scene, or a moment of horror, or a dark image that the show commits to and then moves on from. It is found in the accumulation of everything the episode is doing quietly and deliberately throughout its runtime. The randomness of the death, the cause of the death, the permanence of the death. The way the show treats that permanence with complete sincerity. The randomness is what hits hardest on reflection. Maud Flanders is killed because she stood up. That is the entire cause and mechanism of her death. She stood up. If she had remained seated for another few seconds, the t-shirts would have flown past her and hit someone else, and the day at the races would have continued normally, and she would have gone home with her family and gone to bed that night and woken up the next morning. She stood up. And because she stood up at that specific moment in that specific spot, she is gone. There is no lesson in this. There is no meaning in it. The universe did not arrange this death to tell a story or make a point or teach anyone anything. It was random. It was the kind of thing that happens in a world where causes and effects do not arrange themselves into meaningful patterns, and where standing up at the wrong moment is all it takes. The show had spent 11 years operating with cartoon logic, where causes and effects made narrative sense, where things happened because the story needed them to happen, where the world was shaped by the requirements of good storytelling. In this episode, it abandoned all of that and let the death be meaningless. Which is, of course, the most honest thing it could have done, because most real deaths are exactly that. The cause of the death is an additional layer of discomfort that the show does not acknowledge directly, but that sits underneath the episode's entire second half. Homer asked for those t-shirts. He made the request that sent the promotional merchandise into the stands at the moment Maude was standing. He did not know what would happen. He could not have known. He did not intend any harm. But the causal chain that ends with Maude Flanders dead in the bleachers begins with Homer wanting a free shirt. The show does not make this into a moment of reckoning for Homer. There is no scene where he fully confronts his role in what happened. The connection is simply there, in the logic of the episode, available to anyone who is paying attention. This, too, is honest in a way that is quietly hard to sit with. Real accidents work this way. Real loss often has a chain of ordinary decisions behind it that nobody meant to make into a chain, and that nobody at the beginning of the chain would have recognized as dangerous. Homer wanted a t-shirt. That is the first link. It is a completely ordinary, harmless, Homer-sized want. And at the end of the chain that begins with it, his neighbor's wife is dead. The permanence of the death is what makes everything else matter as much as it does. If the show had found a way to undo it, if Maude had turned out to be alive, or if subsequent episodes had gradually reintroduced her, or if the show had found some narrative mechanism to make her absence temporary, the death would have been dramatic in the short term and meaningless in the long term, which is how cartoon deaths usually function. But Maude Flanders did not come back. She is gone in every episode that follows this one. Ned is a widower in every episode that follows this one. The world of the show absorbed this loss and carried it forward, and the carrying forward is what gives the episode its weight. She had been a presence in the show for over a decade before this episode. Not a major character in the sense of having her own storylines or her own development arc, but a constant, a fixture. Someone who is simply always there in the way that some people are always there, in the background, available, present, part of what makes the world of the show feel populated and real. Her presence was so consistent and so unremarkable that most viewers probably never fully registered it until it was gone. That is the specific kind of loss the episode is modeling. Not the loss of someone who is at the center of things, whose absence everyone would immediately feel because they were so central. The loss of someone who was simply always there. Someone whose presence you registered without thinking about it. Whose absence creates a gap that is hard to describe precisely because you never fully articulated what their presence meant while you had it. The most common kind of real loss. The kind that catches people off guard precisely because they never thought to prepare for it. The episode ends with Ned trying to move forward. He is not healed. He is not resolved. He is simply a man at the beginning of a very long road, doing what people do at the beginning of that road, putting one foot in front of the other because there is nothing else available to do. The show does not give him a destination. It does not tell him or the audience how this is going to turn out. It just leaves him there, in the world that he has to live in now, which is the same world as before, except that the person he loved most is not in it anymore. That is the ending. Ned in a world without Maude. The show simply leaves him there. What makes Alone Again Natura-Diddily disturbing is not what it does loudly, it is what it does quietly. It is the decision to use the most ordinary possible cause for the most permanent possible consequence. It is the decision to make the death mean nothing in the narrative sense, while meaning everything in the human sense. It is the decision to let Ned's grief be real, and to leave it alone, and to not use comedy to make the audience feel better about it. The show had been a place where things did not stick, where the reset happened automatically and nothing carried over. This episode proved that was no longer completely true. Something had changed. The world of the show could lose someone and not get them back. and the first time it proved that, it chose the most mundane possible cause it could find, as if to say that the things you need to fear are not the monsters or the supernatural or the extraordinary. They are the t-shirt cannons at sporting events. They are the ordinary moments where someone stands up at the wrong time. Quote, 10. As quietly devastating as the loss of Maud Flanders is, a death that comes from nowhere and means everything, the next section moves to an episode that disturbs for an entirely different reason. Because while Maud's death is something that happened to a good person through random chance, the next episode is about what happens when an innocent man is destroyed not by accident or randomness, but by design, by a media machine that takes the truth and bends it into whatever shape gets the most attention. Section 10. Homer Badman. The episode where an innocent man was destroyed and nobody cared about the truth. There is a machine that exists in the modern world that most people interact with every single day without fully understanding what it is capable of. It is not a physical machine. It does not have moving parts that you can see or buttons that you can press. It is the machine of public narrative, the system by which a story gets told about a person, spreads to everyone who is paying attention, and becomes the version of reality that the audience accepts as true regardless of what the actual truth is. Most people understand in a general way that this machine exists and that it can be unfair. Most people do not understand, until it is aimed at someone they know or at themselves, exactly how completely it can dismantle a person's life while the person inside the life stands there telling the truth and watches everyone choose the machine's version over theirs. Homer Badman is the episode where the Simpsons built that machine in miniature, ran it at full speed, and showed you every single gear inside it. The episode aired in November 1994 during the 6th season of The Simpsons. It is not a horror episode. It is not a Treehouse of Horror segment. It takes place in the ordinary world of Springfield with the ordinary characters doing ordinary things, and it uses that ordinariness as the foundation for something that is genuinely, deeply unsettling in a way that has only become more relevant in the years since it was made. The show was working in 1994, well before the internet changed the speed at which stories spread and reputations collapsed, and it was describing a mechanism that would become one of the defining features of public life in the decades that followed. The episode begins with Homer and Marge trying to attend a candy convention. This is exactly the kind of absurd premise the show built its best episodes around in its middle seasons. A completely silly starting point that the writers use to set up something they actually want to say. Homer loves candy. There is a candy convention in Springfield. He wants to go. He and Marge hire a babysitter named Ashley Grant, a graduate student, to watch the children while they go to the convention. The convention itself is played for pure comedy. Homer and Marge walk through a world made entirely of candy and chocolate and sugar. Homer is in a state of complete happiness. He fills his pockets and his jacket and anywhere else he can find room with samples and free pieces of candy. He is a child in a candy store, literally. The scene is warm and funny and deliberately designed to establish Homer as someone who is enthusiastic and harmless and entirely without any kind of ulterior motive. He is just a man who really loves candy. At the end of the convention, Homer discovers that he has acquired one piece of candy that is exceptionally rare. It is a gummy Venus de Milo, a gummy candy made in the shape of the famous ancient statue. The show establishes that this candy is extremely rare and extremely valuable to Homer, who treats it with the reverence of someone holding something genuinely precious. He puts it somewhere safe for the drive home. On the drive back, Homer, Marge, and Ashley are in the car together. At some point during the journey, Homer reaches behind him and grabs something from Ashley's skirt. What he is grabbing is the gummy Venus de Milo, which has become stuck to the back of her skirt without either of them realizing it. His only thought in the moment is the candy. He sees it, he grabs it, and he does so from behind her, with both hands, without saying anything first. Ashley Grant reports him for sexual harassment. From her perspective, in that moment, this is a completely understandable response. She did not know about the candy. She did not see it. What she experienced was a man reaching behind her and grabbing her without warning or explanation. Her response is the response of someone who genuinely does not understand what just happened, and whose immediate interpretation of the event is the only interpretation available to her without additional context. From Homer's perspective, he grabbed a piece of candy that was stuck to someone's skirt. That is the entirety of his intention and his understanding of the event. He is not lying when he says this. He is not constructing a defense after the fact. He genuinely reached for the candy and grabbed it and had no other thought in his head at that moment. Both of these things are true at the same time. The event is real. The interpretations are different. In a just world, this would be the starting point for a conversation where the full context was shared and both people could understand what had actually happened. In the world of Homer Badman, it is the starting point for something else entirely. A tabloid television news program called Rock Bottom gets hold of the story. Rock Bottom is the show's version of the sensationalist news programs that were extremely popular in American television in the early 1990s. Programs that specialized in dramatic, emotionally charged stories delivered with maximum impact and minimum concern for whether the complete picture was being presented. The anchor of Rock Bottom is a man named Godfrey Jones, and he approaches the story about Homer the way Rock Bottom approaches every story, which is with a clear idea of what the narrative is going to be before the investigation has even begun. Homer agrees to sit for an interview with Godfrey Jones. He believes, in the simple and trusting way that Homer believes things, that the interview will give him the opportunity to explain what happened and set the record straight. He is not prepared for what Rock Bottom does with that interview. He could not be prepared for it because what Rock Bottom does is something that most people, even people who distrust sensationalist media, do not fully understand is possible until they see it demonstrated. The interview airs. The show presents Homer's edited words to the audience, and then, crucially, shows the audience the original recording alongside it so they can see exactly what was removed and rearranged. This is the most important formal choice the episode makes, and it is what separates Homer Badman from a simple story about media unfairness. The show does not just tell you that Homer was misrepresented, it shows you, in precise detail, exactly how the misrepresentation was constructed. In the original recording, Homer says things that are completely ordinary and self-explanatory in context. In the edited version that Rock Bottom broadcasts, sentences are cut in half, words from different parts of the interview are placed next to each other, pauses are inserted in the wrong places, and responses to one question are made to appear as responses to completely different questions. The result is a version of Homer saying things he never said, expressing things he never expressed, and presenting himself as someone with intentions that were never his intentions. The audience watching Rock Bottom sees the edited version. They do not see the original. They see a man who appears to be confessing to something he is not confessing to, who appears to be saying things that are deeply incriminating, who appears to be exactly the kind of person that Rock Bottom is presenting him as. And they believe it. Because why would they not believe it? They watched it on television. The man said those things. They heard him. Homer did not say those things. But the people watching Rock Bottom will never hear the original recording. They will carry the edited version with them as the truth because it is the only version they have access to. and the edited version was constructed specifically to be convincing. Springfield responds immediately and completely. The speed of the response is one of the episode's most important points. There is no period of uncertainty. There is no pause where the public says it wants to hear more before making up its mind. The narrative arrives, fully formed and easily understood, and the public adopts it without processing time. Within what appears to be a very short period after the rock bottom broadcast, Homer Simpson's life has been transformed around him into something he does not recognize. Protesters set up outside the Simpson house. They are there constantly, in significant numbers, with signs and chants. The family cannot leave without walking through them. The family cannot be in their own front yard without being visible to people whose explicit purpose in being there is to communicate their contempt for Homer. The house that has always been the safe center of the show's world, the place every episode comes home to, is now surrounded by people who want Homer to know what they think of him. A group of graduate students, colleagues of Ashley Grant's, install surveillance equipment inside the house. They are there to observe Homer in his natural environment, as though he is a specimen in an experiment rather than a person in his own home. They watch him eat. They watch him sleep. They watch him interact with his family. They film everything and narrate it with the language of people who have already decided what they are observing and are simply collecting evidence to support that conclusion. Homer cannot ask them to leave in a way that sticks. The social pressure of the situation has made his own home a place where he no longer has full control. A movie of the week is produced about him. It is completed and broadcast in what seems like an impossibly short time, which the show uses to make a point about how quickly the entertainment industry can move when there is a narrative that audiences want to consume. The movie presents a version of Homer that is not Homer, a theatrical villain constructed from the same edited reality as the rock bottom interview, designed to be maximally satisfying to an audience that has already decided what kind of person Homer is. Homer tries to tell the truth. He tells it directly to the protesters outside his house. He tells it to reporters. He tells it to anyone who will listen. He is completely sincere. He is not performing innocence. He is a man telling you exactly what happened because it is what happened, and it matters to him that people understand this. He is not a complicated person, and he has no mechanism for strategic communication. He just tells you the truth and asks you to believe him. Nobody believes him. Not because the truth is unconvincing, not because Homer is a bad communicator or a suspicious figure. Nobody believes him because the narrative that Rock Bottom created is more satisfying, more complete, and more emotionally engaging than the truth. The truth is that a man grabbed a piece of candy off a babysitter's skirt by accident. That story does not sustain a protest, or a movie of the week, or a graduate research project. The story that Rock Bottom told does. The machine does not need the truth. The machine needs a story that works, and the truth does not work as well as the edited version, so the edited version wins. The resolution comes from an unexpected direction. Another television program, a public access show called Bite Back with Kent Brockman, broadcasts the unedited version of Homer's rock bottom interview alongside the edited version and demonstrates the discrepancy. The comparison is direct and clear and impossible to argue with. The public watches the original recording and sees immediately that the edited version reversed Homer's meaning. The truth comes out. But the truth comes out through media, not through justice, not through Homer successfully communicating his innocence directly to the people who condemned him. Not through the system of public discourse functioning the way it is supposed to function when someone's reputation is being destroyed by misinformation. The machine corrects itself because another part of the machine decided to correct it. Homer is vindicated not because the truth eventually overpowers the lie, but because one television program chose to show what another television program did. This is the episode's quietest and most disturbing point. The message is not that truth eventually wins. The message is that the only thing powerful enough to counter a media narrative is another media narrative. Homer's own voice telling his own story was not enough. The truth that he had access to and could articulate clearly was not enough. It took a television program to undo what a television program had done. And if that program had not chosen to cover the story, Homer would have remained destroyed. What makes Homer Badman so unsettling is how precisely it describes a process that most people in 1994 had not fully seen in action, but that would become one of the defining experiences of the following decades. The edited interview, the instant public verdict, the protesters outside the house, the surveillance, the movie, the total helplessness of the person at the center of it all, telling the truth to people who have already decided. The show built all of this in 1994 from the raw materials of tabloid television, and what it built was an almost perfect model of something that would eventually happen on a much larger scale to many more people through many more channels. The episode is disturbing because it is accurate. It shows you the gears of the machine and explains exactly how each one works. And then it tells you, through the resolution, that the only protection against the machine is the machine itself. Which means that people who do not have access to a television program willing to cover their side of the story have no protection at all. Homer was lucky. Godfrey Jones decided to cover the correction. The machine chose to fix what it broke. Not everyone the machine breaks gets that. Underscore underscore quote underscore 11 underscore underscore underscore. While Homer Badman disturbs you by showing you how an innocent person can be dismantled by a system that does not care about truth, the next section goes somewhere that is darker in a completely different way. Because the next episode is not about what the world does to a person from the outside. It is about what was done to a child from the very beginning, before he ever had a choice, before he ever had a voice, locked in an attic and fed through a slot, and the question of whether the people who put him there were protecting anyone at all. Section 11, Treehouse of Horror 7, The Child in the Attic and the Family That Put Him There. There are certain kinds of horror that work because they are impossible. A monster that cannot be killed, a creature that defies the laws of nature, a threat that operates outside the boundaries of the real world and therefore outside the boundaries of anything you might actually encounter in your own life. This kind of horror is frightening in the moment and then it fades, because the distance between what you saw and what your life actually contains is wide enough to feel safe. You go to sleep and you know that the thing on the screen is not under your bed or outside your window or waiting for you in the morning. The impossibility that made it frightening is the same thing that makes it manageable. And then there is the other kind. The kind that works precisely because it is not impossible. The kind that is built from things that exist in the real world. Houses, families, decisions made by adults about children. The quiet machinery of a home operating behind closed doors. This kind of horror does not fade the same way. It stays with you because the distance between what you saw and what your life contains is not wide at all. It is the distance between your living room and your attic. It is the distance between what your family tells you and what your family does not tell you. It is the distance between the version of your home that you can see and the version that exists in the parts you have never been allowed to enter. The Thing and I, the first segment of Treehouse of Horror 7, is built entirely from that second kind of horror. It aired in October 1996 during the 8th season of The Simpsons. On the surface, it is a parody of gothic horror stories about secret family members kept hidden away. Stories like The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and various tales involving twins and doubles, and the dark sides of personalities that polite society prefers not to acknowledge. The segment uses those references as its scaffolding. But what it builds on top of that scaffolding is something that operates on its own terms and does not need the references to justify how deeply it unsettles. The segment begins at night in the Simpson house. Bart and Lisa are in bed. They can hear sounds coming from above them. Not the ordinary sounds of a house settling or pipes moving through walls. Specific sounds. Sounds that suggest movement. Something above them is awake and active in the part of the house that is above their floor. They lie in their beds and listen, and then sounds do not stop. This is an opening that works because it is immediately and completely relatable. Every child who has lived in a house with an attic has had some version of this experience. Lying in the dark and listening to the space above them and trying to decide what is making the noise and whether it matters. The show takes that universal childhood experience and confirms the fear underneath it. Yes, there is something up there. Yes, it is real. Yes, it has been there the entire time. Bart and Lisa investigate. They find their way to the attic and they push open the door and they look inside. What they find is not a monster in the traditional sense. It is not a creature from outside the family or a supernatural presence that has invaded the house. What they find is a boy. He is roughly Bart's size. He looks like Bart. His features are familiar in a way that is immediately disorienting because his face should not be in this attic. And yet the face itself is one that should be completely familiar. He is chained to the wall. He is eating fish heads from a bowl on the floor. He has been there for a very long time. His name is Hugo. He is Bart's twin brother. Marge and Homer are confronted with what Bart and Lisa have found. They sit the children down and they explain. The explanation is delivered by Dr. Hibbert, the family's doctor, who has apparently been aware of Hugo's existence and his living situation for the entirety of his confinement. Dr. Hibbert explains that Bart and Hugo were born as conjoined twins, twins who were physically attached to each other at birth. In order for both children to survive, a surgeon had to separate them. The surgery was performed. Both twins lived. But the question of what to do with both of them required a decision. The decision, Dr. Hibbert explains, was based on an assessment made at the time of the separation. One twin was good, one twin was evil. The evil twin needed to be contained for the safety of everyone around him. The evil twin was therefore placed in the attic of the family home, chained to the wall, and kept there. Fish heads were delivered through a slot. The arrangement was considered satisfactory. The arrangement had been in place ever since. Hugo has lived in the attic of 742 Evergreen Terrace for his entire life. He did not choose to be born. He did not choose to be a twin. He did not choose to be separated from his brother. He did not choose to be assessed as the evil one. He did not choose any of the circumstances that resulted in him spending every day of his existence chained in a dark space above the family who decided he was too dangerous to live among them. He was placed there as an infant based on a medical judgment made by adults with authority over his life. And the chain and the fish heads and the darkness have been the complete sum of his world ever since. The show asks you to sit with this for a moment before it moves on. Hugo is real. He is present in the scene. He is not an abstraction or a symbol. He is a child, Bart's twin, flesh and blood, with Bart's face, and he has spent his life in an attic. The segment does not rush past this. It allows the reality of Hugo's situation to exist fully in the scene before the story continues. What has been done to Hugo is stated plainly and without comedy, and without any attempt to make it more comfortable than it actually is. Hugo's plan, now that Bart and Lisa have found him, is straightforward. He wants to reattach himself to Bart surgically. He has been thinking about this in the attic, alone, for years. He has developed the skills to perform the surgery himself. He wants to be whole again. He wants the connection that was severed at birth to be restored. This is framed as his villainous intention, the thing the family needs to stop him from doing. But the show does not let you forget that Hugo's desire to be reconnected to his twin comes directly from a life spent chained and alone. His plan is born from his imprisonment. The imprisonment is what the family created. The danger they are now trying to protect themselves from was manufactured by the decision they made when Hugo was an infant. The segment builds to its resolution in the way horror parodies build to resolutions, with a reveal that changes the meaning of everything that came before it. Bart is recaptured by Hugo and strapped to a table. Hugo prepares to perform his reattachment surgery. Before he can complete it, Dr. Hibbert intervenes. In examining both twins in close proximity for the first time, Dr. Hibbert makes a discovery. He checks the scar on each twin from their original separation surgery. The scar's position reveals which twin was attached to which side, and the position of the scar tells him something that nobody bothered to verify in the years since the original assessment was made. Hugo is not the evil twin. Bart is. The original judgment was wrong. The twin who spent his entire life chained in an attic eating fish heads, isolated from every human connection and every experience that makes a childhood, was the good one. The twin who grew up in the family, who went to school and had friends and caused trouble and lived a full life with people who loved him, was the evil one. Hugo is unchained. He is welcomed into the family. He sits at the dinner table with them. He eats real food. He is given the place that was always supposed to be his. The wrong that was done to him is acknowledged and the correction is immediate. Bart is chained in the attic. The segment ends with Bart in Hugo's place. The chain is on his wrist. The fish heads are in the bowl. The attic is dark, and the slot in the door is where things come through, and the rest of the house, where his family is having dinner without him, is just far enough away to hear, but not to reach. The episode closes on Bart in the attic and moves on. The twist is funny in the dark, mechanical way that good horror comedy twists are funny. The irony of it is clean and satisfying. The show set up an expectation and subverted it, and the subversion lands. On a pure structural level, it works exactly the way it is supposed to work. But the comedy of the twist does not absorb the weight of what the segment spent its entire runtime establishing. Hugo was in that attic because of a mistake. A medical judgment made by Dr. Hibbert at the moment of separation was wrong, and nobody went back to check it. Nobody thought to verify the assessment as the years passed. Nobody looked at the child chained above the family dinner table and asked whether the original decision was still the right one, whether the evidence still supported it, whether the child paying the price for that decision deserved to have it reconsidered. The chain stayed on. The fish heads kept coming through the slot. The family went about their lives in the rooms below, and the mistake stayed locked above them, growing older in the dark. This is the horror that does not fade when the segment ends. Not Hugo's plan to reattach himself to Bart, which is strange and dark in an obviously fictional way. The horror is the years, the specific, uncountable accumulation of days that Hugo spent in the attic because one person made one assessment and nobody questioned it afterward. The horror is how ordinary it all was. The fish heads delivered through the slot, the chain long enough to allow limited movement, the sounds of the family below, the darkness above. Not dramatic, not violent. just the grinding, daily reality of a child in a place no child should be, sustained by the quiet machinery of a family that had decided this was how things were. Dr. Hibbert is particularly worth examining in this context. He is not a villain in the traditional sense. He does not appear in this segment with malice or cruelty. He is a doctor who made a professional assessment and acted on it, and then maintained the outcome of that assessment without returning to question it. He participated in chaining a child in an attic and delivering fish heads through a slot, and he did so as part of his professional duties, in the same calm and composed manner that he delivers every piece of medical news in every episode he appears in. The horror of his role in this segment is the horror of authority functioning without accountability, of a person in a position of power making a consequential decision and then never being asked to justify it until the moment the decision is proven wrong. Marge and Homer are equally implicated. They are Bart's parents. They are also Hugo's parents. They are the adults in the house under whose roof a child spent his entire life chained and alone. The show does not give them a scene where they fully reckon with this. They participate in the explanation, and they accept the correction when it comes, and the segment moves on. The weight of what they allowed to happen to their own child is present in the logic of the segment, even though the show does not dwell on it directly. What makes The Thing and I land as hard as it does is the combination of the domestic and the horrifying. The attic of 742 Evergreen Terrace is one of the most familiar addresses in television history. The Simpson house is warm and yellow and full of life, and has been the home base of one of the most beloved families in animated television for decades. Putting Hugo in the attic of that specific house, chaining him to the wall of that specific home, delivers the content of the segment directly into the space that the audience associates most strongly with safety and familiarity. The horror is inside the safe place. It was there the whole time. The warm yellow house with the family inside it had a child chained above it from the beginning, and the family knew, and the doctor knew, and the fish heads went through the slot every day, and nobody asked whether any of it was right. That is the horror that the segment is actually about. Not the surgery plan, or the twist, or the monster in the attic. The horror is the attic itself. The horror is the decision that put someone in it. The horror is the years that passed without that decision being questioned. The horror is how completely ordinary all of it was for everyone except the person in the chain. Hugo got out. The mistake was corrected. The wrong twin sits in the attic in the final frame of the segment, and the right twin takes his seat at the family table. Everything is resolved in the specific and limited way that Treehouse of Horror segments resolve things. But the years that Hugo spent above the family, in the dark, eating fish heads because someone made a wrong call and nobody checked, those years are not resolved. They just happened. They are simply part of what Hugo is and what the family did, sitting inside the segment like a weight that the comedy around it cannot fully lift. __quote_1_2___. As dark as it is to sit with the image of a child in an attic, chained and forgotten by the people who were supposed to protect him, the final section of this list brings everything home in a way that closes out the most disturbing corners of this show. Because the last episode reaches into the places where children are supposed to feel safest of all, takes the objects and spaces that are designed to provide comfort and turns them into something you will never quite look at the same way again. Section 12, Treehouse of Horror 3, The Evil Doll, The Zombie Apocalypse, and The Switch That Should Never Exist. There is a specific kind of comfort that objects are supposed to provide. Toys, dolls, the familiar things that sit in a child's room and are there when the child goes to sleep and there when the child wakes up. These objects are designed with one purpose: to make the world feel safer and warmer and more manageable than it might otherwise feel. A stuffed animal on a bed, a toy on a shelf, a doll that a parent buys for a birthday because they want to give their child something to hold on to. These are the objects of safety. The objects that exist specifically to tell a child that the world is okay and that someone who loves them put something good into their hands. Treehouse of Horror 3 takes those objects and turns them into something else entirely. The episode aired in October 1992 during the 4th season of The Simpsons. It is the show's 3rd Halloween special, and it contains 3 separate segments. 2 of them are the focus of this section, and between them they cover 2 completely different kinds of horror that share one common thread: the horror of a world where the things that are supposed to be safe are not safe at all, where the objects and situations designed for comfort have been quietly, completely, and in one case, literally switched to something that wants to destroy you. The first segment is called Clown Without Pity. It begins on Bart's birthday. Homer has forgotten to buy a gift. This is a classic Homer failure, the kind of oversight that the show has built dozens of episodes around. Homer realizing at the last possible moment that he has dropped the ball on something important and scrambling to fix it before anyone fully notices. He runs out of the house in a panic and finds himself in front of a shop he has not seen before. The shop is called House of Evil. Its tagline, printed somewhere on the storefront, is that it is the customer's one-stop evil shop. Homer goes inside anyway. The shop's interior is dark and cluttered and full of objects that carry an obvious sense of wrongness, the kind of place that every piece of common sense a person possesses tells them to leave immediately. Homer does not leave. He needs a gift. He finds a Krusty the Clown doll on the shelf and he buys it. The shopkeeper behind the counter is an old man who speaks in the manner of someone who has been in the business of selling cursed objects for long enough that he no longer feels the need to apologize for it. He tells Homer that the doll comes with a terrible curse. Homer is not particularly concerned about this. He pays for the doll and takes it home. Bart opens the gift. He is delighted. The Krusty doll is exactly the kind of thing Bart would want. A toy version of his favorite television clown, big and bright and immediately appealing to a 10-year-old boy who loves Krusty with a genuine and uncomplicated enthusiasm. Bart takes the doll to his room. The birthday party continues. Everything seems fine. It does not stay fine for long. The doll begins trying to kill Homer. Not metaphorically, not in the vague, ominous way that horror films sometimes use to suggest a threat is developing. The doll physically, actively, and with apparent genuine intent tries to end Homer Simpson's life. It strangles him in the shower. Its small plastic hands wrap around Homer's throat, and it squeezes with a strength that should be impossible for an object its size. Homer fights it off. He tells Marge what is happening. Marge looks at the doll. The doll smiles up at her with the painted smile of a clown toy and gives every appearance of being completely inert and harmless. Then it tries to stab Homer. It acquires a knife from somewhere in the house and it comes after him with it. Homer runs from his own bathroom, from his own kitchen, from the rooms of his own home, chased by a toy that should, by any reasonable understanding of the physical world, be incapable of doing anything more than sitting on a shelf and looking cheerful. The Krusty doll does not care about reasonable understandings of the physical world. The Krusty doll has a knife and intentions. Homer calls the company that makes Krusty dolls and reports the problem. A repairman comes to the house. He examines the doll. He turns it over in his hands with the practiced efficiency of someone whose job is to solve exactly this kind of complaint. He finds the issue. On the back of the doll there is a small switch. The switch has 2 settings. One setting says good, the other setting says evil. The switch is set to evil. The repairman clicks it over to good. He sets the doll down. The doll looks up at Homer with the same painted smile and offers to get Homer a beer and a sandwich. Problem solved. Repairman leaves. Krusty Doll is now good and helpful and poses no further threat to anyone in the Simpson household. Except that the problem is not actually solved, and the segment understands this even if it does not say it directly. The problem is the switch. The problem is that this switch exists. The problem is that a company that manufactures children's toys, objects designed specifically to be placed in the hands and rooms and beds of children, has built their product with a small switch on the back that can be set to either good or evil, and that the quality control process within this company is apparently loose enough that dolls are leaving the factory set to evil with sufficient regularity that they have a repairman whose job is specifically to come to people's houses and fix this. Every Krusty Doll that has ever been sold could be set to evil. You would not know when you bought it. You would not know when you gave it to your child. You would not know until it was trying to strangle someone in the shower. The switch is on the back where a child would not think to look and where a parent would not think to check. Because why would you check the back of a toy for an evil setting? Because that is not something that should exist. The resolution of the segment, clicking the switch to good, implies that every doll is a potential threat that simply has not revealed itself yet. Every shelf in every toy store, every wrapped gift at every birthday party, every comfort object in every child's room, all of it subject to a small switch in the back that someone might have set wrong before the product left the factory. That is the horror underneath the comedy of Clown Without Pity. The segment is funny. The repairman finding the switch and clicking it over is a genuinely good joke with a clean and satisfying structure. But the world the joke creates, a world where children's toys come equipped with an evil setting that functions exactly as advertised, is a world that does not stop being disturbing just because the joke landed well. The comedy and the horror exist at the same time, and neither one cancels the other out. The third segment of the episode is called Dial Z for Zombie. It begins in the Springfield Public Library, where Bart has discovered a section of the library that most libraries do not contain. The section is labeled Occult. It is tucked away in a corner, and it contains books about magic and spells and the supernatural forces that most of the library's collection does not acknowledge. Bart is not supposed to be in this section. He ends up there anyway. He finds a book of spells. He takes it home. He has a specific purpose in mind for it. The family's original cat, Snowball the First, died before the show's timeline began. She is buried in the family's backyard. Bart wants to use the spellbook to raise Snowball the First from the dead. His intention is not sinister. He misses the cat. He wants to bring her back. He reads the relevant spell from the book and performs it as best he can understand the instructions. He does not raise Snowball the First. He raises everyone else. The dead of Springfield come out of the ground. Not just Springfield's dead. The segment suggests a general resurrection of the deceased that extends beyond the boundaries of the town. Zombies begin appearing everywhere. They move through the streets of Springfield in the way zombies move in every zombie story ever told. Slowly, relentlessly, with the single-minded intention of reaching the living and converting them. Springfield's citizens flee. The living population of the town is suddenly dramatically outnumbered by the dead population, and the dead population is mobile and hungry and growing as it converts more people. The Simpson family boards up their house. They nail planks across the windows. They move furniture against the doors. They do what people in zombie stories do when they are trying to hold a position against an overwhelming force. They make their home as defensible as they can, and they hope it is enough. The house that has always been the safe center of the show's world is now a fortified position in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, and the things pressing against the windows and doors are things that used to be neighbors and townspeople, and people the family passed on the street every day. Homer is given a shotgun. He goes outside to deal with the zombie threat directly. What follows is a sequence where Homer moves through the zombie-filled streets of Springfield and shoots the undead versions of people and figures he encounters. Among those he shoots are zombie versions of historical figures. Albert Einstein and William Shakespeare appear as zombies in this sequence, and Homer dispatches them. He also encounters zombie versions of other figures whose identities are played for comedy in the context of the sequence. The sequence works as horror parody in the most direct sense. It takes the conventions of zombie films and applies them to the world of the show with commitment, and then finds the comedy in that combination. But the horror scaffolding is real before the comedy engages with it. The zombies in this segment behave like zombies. They are drawn with the visual language of threat. They move through Springfield and they turn people, and the number of living humans is going down. This is the actual premise of the segment, played straight, before the jokes arrive to give the audience something to laugh at, rather than just something to feel uneasy about. Bart realizes that the spell book that raised the dead must also contain the counterspell. He goes back to the book and finds it. He performs the counterspell. It works. The zombies stop. The dead go back into the ground. The undead population of Springfield returns to its previous state of being simply dead and not also ambulatory. The crisis ends. Springfield survives. But the segment, like the best horror content this show produced, earns its disturbing reputation through a combination of commitment and implication, rather than through any single explicit moment of violence or darkness. The commitment is in how seriously the show treats the zombie premise before the comedy takes over. The implication is in what the segment is saying about the library, the specific, ordinary public institution at the center of the story. Bart found the spellbook in the Springfield Public Library, in the occult section, which means the Springfield Public Library has an occult section, which means there is a designated space in a public building where members of the community, including children, including Bart, who is 10 years old and was apparently able to access this section without restriction, can browse books about raising the dead. The book Bart used was sitting on that shelf, available to anyone who came looking, including a 10-year-old boy who used it to accidentally start a zombie apocalypse. Libraries are among the safest and most trusted institutions in any community. They are where children go to learn. They are where knowledge is kept and made available to anyone who needs it. The idea that the Springfield Public Library contains, in a section accessible to Bart Simpson, the specific tools required to accidentally trigger a town-wide uprising of the dead is the Dial Z for Zombie version of the good-evil switch on the Krusty doll. The safe place is not safe. The trusted institution contains something it probably should not. The comfort of the familiar environment conceals something that can, under the right circumstances, start a catastrophe. Both segments of Treehouse of Horror 3 that this section examines are, at their core, about the same thing. They are about the spaces and objects and institutions that human beings designate as safe, and the way those designations can be wrong without anyone knowing until it is too late. A toy store sells you a doll and does not tell you about the switch. A library opens its doors to children and does not put a lock on the occult section. The safety is assumed. The safety is performed. The safety is not actually guaranteed by anything except the hope that nobody checks what is on the back of the doll or looks in the corner of the library where the spell books are kept. This is why Treehouse of Horror 3 closes this list rather than sitting somewhere in the middle of it. The episodes that came before it in this video essay are disturbing for reasons that are large and obvious and specific. a man burning alive, a child on a water tower, a banned episode, a family with a secret twin chained in their attic. The horror in those episodes is right on the surface, where you can see it and name it and keep track of it. The horror in Treehouse of Horror 3 is quieter and smaller, and sits inside things you would never ordinarily think to examine. It is in the switch you did not know was there. It is in the shelf in the corner of the building you trust most. It is in the everyday objects and ordinary places that do everything right up until the moment they do not. The Simpsons has spent its entire run living in the space between comfort and discomfort, between the warm yellow of the opening credits and the dark corners that the show has always been willing to look into when it thought something needed to be said. The episodes on this list are the moments when the dark corners took over completely, when the show stopped protecting the audience from what it was seeing and just let the image sit there. A family melting into a flesh blob. A man laughing at a funeral. A child rowing alone in gray water. A man under a car dragging across the road, patient and cold and waiting. A child on a water tower. A child in an attic. A man burning while people argued. A woman who stood up at the wrong moment. None of these images go away easily. They're the ones that stayed. They're the ones that surface when someone asks you what the most disturbing thing was that you saw in something that was supposed to be a comedy. They're the proof that a cartoon is not limited by its format, that animation is not inherently safe, and that a show about a yellow family in a fictional town has always been capable of reaching through the screen and leaving a mark. That is what the best of these episodes did. They reached through. And if you watched any of them before you were old enough to fully understand why they were affecting you, they are still in there somewhere, waiting quietly in the part of your memory where the things you cannot fully explain tend to live. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.